Chapter 550. Shuexian left a message at the most dangerous moment, saying that she had left all the secrets in the Boundless Mountain's Clear Harmony Palace Hall. He was very curious what she meant when she said that these tens of thousands of years were all lies. This definitely wasn't her going crazy. Something that could make a shattering void tier cultivator become enemies with her own clansmen, even sacrificing herself to pass on the secrets, could possibly be shockingly related. Since he had come to the middle state, finding the secrets left behind by Shuexian naturally became a top priority. The tortoise shell was enlarged to 100 meters in size and weighed several tens of thousands of kilograms, but Ling Han's physical strength was too terrifying. He could easily lift it with one hand and didn't need to use origin power at all. He looked at the map and tried hard to compare it with his memory, eliminating impossible mountains and rivers. There are still as many as 21. Ling Han shook his head. He could only eliminate so many, and there were still 21 mountain ranges that matched the description in his memory. After all, he had never been there before, and being able to narrow down the scope to this extent was already not bad. Should I go now or wait until after the tournament? Ling Han pondered. Finding the Clear Harmony Palace Hall is definitely not something that can be done in a day or two. Since I promised to help with the tournament, I obviously can't go back on my word. Fine, I'll go after the tournament. However, will I stay in the Spirit Treasures Pavilion for this month? Right, Yin Hong said that recently many people came out from the ancient site, and it's very likely that they have treasures that they don't need, and will sell them at the auction. Then when will the auction start? What a coincidence, there would be one tonight, and it was a once-a-month large-scale auction. And after another month, there would be the once-a-year super auction. It would be very grand and there would be many treasures. It was said that sometimes even deity transformation tier and heaven tier elites would appear. However, the once-a-month large-scale auction required an invitation to enter. So Ling Han found Yin Hong and asked her to help him get an invitation. Thinking about it, though Yin Hong's position in the Middle State Spirit Treasures Pavilion was not high, getting an invitation should not be a problem. However, things did not go as expected. Yin Hong actually returned empty-handed. How infuriating! Yin Hong's face was full of anger as soon as she entered the room. Yin Chi, that bitch actually dared to block me. She didn't even give me an invitation and kept talking nonsense with me. Ling Han frowned and said, I can't get it. Yin Hong sat to one side in displeasure and said helplessly, that bitch is holding me back. She won't give it to me. Does she have a grudge against you? Ling Han asked. You can say that. Yin Hong thought about it. She's just jealous that my breasts are bigger than hers. Ling Han naturally wouldn't believe it. She is my third uncle's daughter, and my third uncle doesn't have a good relationship with my father. She told the truth. Ling Han nodded. Family grudges. I'll think of another way to get you an invitation, Yin Hong said again. Ling Han shook his head and said, I'll think of a way myself. What can you do now? Yin Hong did not believe him. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, Don't forget my true identity. Yin Hong was shocked and said, No way, are you sure you want to take such a risk? This isn't called taking a risk, but rather reducing the risk. Ling Han smiled. He decided to appear with his original identity. Was a heaven-grade alchemist not qualified to participate in the auction? And no matter what good things he bought at the auction, everyone would only stare at Ling Han and not Han Lin. Because once the auction ended, Ling Han would disappear and be replaced by Han Lin. TSK safe. Making up his mind, Ling Han also became leisurely. When it was dinner time, he took out the ingredients from the Black Tower to share with the girls, which naturally made everyone eat to their heart's content, especially Hellion Sun Shui and Yin Hong. They hadn't eaten much, and fought over the food without caring about their image as virtuous ladies. Moreover, they weren't virtuous ladies. One lost her memory, and the other kept saying, I'll sleep with you all day long. Where would they have any restraint? Give me this every day, and I'll even throw myself at you, the female pervert said. Ling Han obviously pretended not to hear. He left the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, quietly removing the disguise on his face, returning to his original appearance, and then strode towards the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. This pavilion is not open at night, and only receives special guests. He had just walked up the stairs when he was blocked by someone. Ling Han directly revealed his identity and said, "I am Ling Han, a heaven-grade alchemist. Does this count as a special guest?" What? That person was obviously stunned by the words heaven-grade alchemist. After a slight hesitation, he hurriedly said, "Please wait a moment, esteemed guest. Allow this lowly one to immediately report." He hurriedly ran up like a wisp of smoke. There were obviously other people responsible for maintaining order here. At this time, the auction was about to begin, and many people passed by one after another. There were middle-aged men with majestic gait, and there were also unfathomable old men, as well as youths full of vigor and heroic bearing. They naturally all had invitations and were accepted one by one. Some people saw Ling Han waiting at the bottom of the stairs, and instantly looked disdainful. This beggar wanted to enter without an invitation? Where did this beggar come from? "Hey brat, kneel down and call me grandpa, and I'll bring you in to see how it goes." There would always be people with cheap mouths, not taking Ling Han's flower blossom tear cultivation seriously. In the middle state, flower blossom tear cultivators really weren't that strong. Ling Han's gaze turned cold, and he said, "Such a cheap mouth, aren't you afraid of causing trouble for your family?" This was a profligate young man in his 20s. He was only in the spiritual ocean tier, yet he had the arrogance of "I'm ranked third in the world." "Damn brat, do you know who I am?" the profligate young man said proudly. "My surname is Sunday, oh grandson." Ling Han nodded. "Fuck." The profligate young man instantly jumped up in anger. This youngster was too mean. "Young master son, don't be angry. He's just a brat from the countryside. Moreover, this is the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, so it's not convenient to fight." Someone immediately tried to mediate. It was the profligate young man's scoundrel friend. The profligate young man snorted, flicked his sleeves and said, "Consider yourself lucky, or else I'll chop you into pieces." Ling Han shook his head. This kind of trash was better to be killed with a single finger. He, a heaven-grade alchemist, was already targeted by countless people anyway, so he wasn't afraid of one or two more. "The 5 dragons and 2 phoenixes are here." Really? This aura is really too shocking. It was at this moment that there was a sudden commotion in the crowd. Everyone looked towards the back, and saw a group of 7 people striding over. There were a total of 5 men and 2 women, and every one of them was only 24 or 25 years old. However, every one of them had the bearing of dragons and phoenixes among men, and every one of them was in the flower blossom tier. As expected of the middle state, there were actually so many flower blossom tier cultivators below the age of 30. And this was only Million Treasures City, not ancient sects like the Heaven Sword sect and the Cloud Phoenix sect. It was really unknown how strong of a genius they had. The 5 dragons and 2 phoenixes were the 7 most outstanding people in the younger generation of Million Treasure City, and they were all disciples of the city's great clans. If it weren't for that, without sufficient cultivation resources, no matter how much of a genius you were, you wouldn't be able to advance into the flower blossom tier before the age of 30 by yourself. These 7 people walked proudly, and every one of them exuded an aura of invincible confidence. A dragon saw Ling Han, and could not help but look surprised. "I never thought that there would actually be such a young flower blossom tier cultivator. Haha brat, become my follower." Chapter 551. Third Elder, what's the point of talking nonsense with him? Kill him, and the mystical power will be ours. Zhou Yucheng hooted from the side. "That's true." Zhou Deyuan nodded and strode towards Ling Han. The aura of the deity transformation tier spread out. This was not only a deterrent to Ling Han, but also a deterrent to the others. His meaning was that this brat was his cup of tea, and they had better think twice before making a move. Ling Han looked at the 2 members of the Zhou clan, and his killing intent involuntarily boiled. Previously, because of Zhou Deyuan's attack, he had missed the opportunity to use the Earth Overturning Seal. If it were not for the fact that he still had one more chance, even if he tore Zhou Deyuan's body into 1,000 pieces, so what? Previously, he had not bothered to settle the score with them, and now that they had delivered themselves to his doorstep, what need was there for Ling Han to be polite? He smiled calmly and said, as the saying goes, the bird that sticks out gets shot. The others did not move and only you two idiots jumped out. If this is not seeking death, then what is? Insolence. In front of the third elder. How dare you be so arrogant? Zhou Yucheng pointed at him. If it were not for the fact that his cultivation level was inferior, he really wanted to charge over and tear Ling Han to shreds. Zhou Deyuan's gaze was also dark. He stretched out his right hand, and multiple patterns intertwined, forming a brilliant light. He gave a cold humph and grabbed out at Ling Han. Origin power condensed, and turned into an even larger palm. It descended from the skies and slapped down towards Ling Han. It was incomparably swift and fierce, and its purpose was to take Ling Han's life. Ling Han stood still, and waited until the large palm slapped down. Only then did he move. A flash of sword ray slashed out and this large palm was sliced into two, its brilliance completely dissipating. Ah! Zhou Deyuan could not help but humph. Using his left hand to support his right hand, he saw that there was shockingly a wound on his right palm, and fresh blood was flowing out. The blood dripped onto the ground, causing the earth to tremble. The blood of a martial artist in the deity transformation tier was definitely a precious medicine. If it came across an unscrupulous alchemist, it could even be plucked and used as medicine. Zhou Deyuan hurriedly used his origin power to stop the loss of blood, but he shockingly discovered that there was a terrifying sword intent circulating in the wound. The moment his origin power surged over, it was shattered, and actually sealed the wound innumerable times. Blood was still flowing. How could this be possible? How could this brat's battle prowess be so strong? One sword strike was enough to wound him so severely. Zhou Deyuan could not believe it. A mere junior in the spiritual infant tier had been slashed by him previously, and he had already lowered his head and admitted defeat, not even daring to show his anger. If Ling Han was really so strong, then what the hell was he supposed to endure? Third elder. Zhou Yucheng called out a bit shakily. In his mind, the 4 grand elders of the clan should all be existences that could sweep through the world, so how could they possibly suffer a loss at the hands of a brat? Zhou Deyuan was the source of his arrogance, and also the source of his confidence. Now that the third elder had actually been wounded by a single sword strike from Ling Han, it instantly made him want to retreat. He was afraid that there would be a chance. Old dog, you insist on seeking death, so I can only fulfill your wish. Ling Han did not draw out the Revere Life Sword or the Demon Birth Sword. Just now, he had merely waved his fingers together, but had used the mystical power of the Thunderclap 9th Heaven. It was precisely this mystical power that wreaked havoc in the other's wound, not allowing the other's wound to heal easily. I'm going to kill you, Zhou Deyuan roared. He drew out his saber, and brandished it in a slash towards Ling Han. Xiao, a flash of saber light slashed out. It was as long as a few dozen meters, and it turned into a furious dragon. Ling Han also drew his sword. After all, the other was in existence in the peak stage of the deity transformation tier. That previous strike could be said to have hit the other's carelessness, but it was indeed not to be underestimated. What he drew out was the Demon Birth Sword. To deal with someone like Zhou Deyuan, the Demon Birth Sword was enough. If the Demon Birth Sword still had a tool spirit, it would definitely feel very wronged. I'm also a dignified level 10 spirit tool, yet I'm actually going to be reduced to killing someone in the deity transformation tier? Shua, a sword ray shot out, but it was only about 3 meters long. The power of ray was determined by its length and thickness. The longer and thicker it was, the more terrifying its destructive power would be. Thus, when the ray that Ling Han shot out was only 3 meters long, Zhou Deyuan's heart immediately calmed down, and Zhou Yucheng's confidence also recovered. He actually doubted his own ancestor. He really thought too highly of that brat. Pooh! Sword ray and saber ray collided. Pooh! Saber ray actually split into 2 right down the middle. The 2 halves of saber ray still swept over according to their original trajectory, but they separately streaked past Ling Han's left and right sides. They didn't even need to give way. However, sword ray was like a peerless divine weapon, and continued to sweep towards Zhou Deyuan. Zhou Deyuan was greatly shocked, and hurriedly leaped up to dodge. His face was filled with shock. How could this be? In terms of quality, his saber ray was actually so much inferior to Ling Han's sword ray, and in a direct confrontation, it was completely destroyed by Ling Han's sword ray. It was really like a broken wooden sword coming into contact with a real sword. It would be destroyed upon contact. He couldn't help but tremble slightly. Indeed, the thicker and longer sword ray was, the better it would be, and its destructive power would be greater. However, just like sword chi, sword ray also depended on two other factors: the martial artist's comprehension and the grade of the weapon used. That sword Zhou Deyuan absolutely did not believe that Ling Han's comprehension of the way of the sword far surpassed his grasp of the way of the saber. Then there was only one explanation. The grade of the spirit tool in Ling Han's hands was too high, causing the sword ray that was shot out to be incomparably swift and fierce. In terms of quality, not only did it make up for the gap of a major tier, it was also able to turn the tables and crush him. Haha, this is also mine. Chapter 552. The 5 dragons all had powerful backgrounds. If they were asked to fight the Spirit Treasures Pavilion head-on, they definitely wouldn't dare, but if it was just beating up a person at the main gate or on the steps, they believed that the Spirit Treasures Pavilion wouldn't hold on to this point and not let them off. They were still confident that they had this bit of face. The 5 dragons all stared at Ling Han, their eyes sinister. This young man's impertinence made them very displeased. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back, smiled and said, "If you want to fight, then you'd better think carefully. Later, you'll have to kneel before me and beg for mercy, depending on my mood." Ha! The 5 dragons all laughed coldly. Did this young man completely not know how the word death was written? The bystanders also laughed loudly. They'd seen many arrogant people, but it was the first time they'd seen Ling Han being so unconfident and arrogant. Reckless. Jia Zhang attacked. They were the mighty 5 dragons, so they naturally disdained to join forces. However, being able to be listed as one of the 5 dragons, his strength was naturally extraordinary. As he stretched out his hand, vein-like patterns intertwined, forming a golden divine light. It was as if it wasn't a human's arm, but a golden divine dragon's claw. Ling Han seemed to be struck dumb, completely unresponsive. Everyone shook their heads. He was so awesome, so what other powerful strength did he have? It turned out that he was actually so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. The dragon's claw struck, and a terrifying pressure shook. Even the skin of a low-level flower blossom tier cultivator would be torn apart. Ling Han finally attacked. No, he attacked with his foot, kicking towards Jia Zhang's front. The timing of this kick could be said to be perfect, and it just happened to avoid Jia Zhang's attack. Moreover, if Jia Zhang paid more attention to Ling Han, he definitely wouldn't attack at close range, at least he wouldn't be so rash in his first attack. However, he was careless, thinking that it would be a piece of cake, and this kick directly delivered itself to his face. How could a hand be as long as a foot? Thus, before Jia Zhang's attack could reach Ling Han, he would first be kicked solidly by this kick. Jia Zhang gave a muffled humph, and hurriedly tilted his head, barely dodging this kick. After all, he was one of the 5 dragons, a well-known figure among the younger generation, so he wasn't that weak. He hurriedly retreated, feeling a burning pain on his face. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand to touch his face. To his surprise, he discovered that his hand was stained with blood. He dodged Ling Han's kick, but the strong wind that blew past him was like a blade. He had not formed body of iron sheet, so how could he possibly feel good after being brushed by the aftermath of a flower blossom tier martial artist's attack? Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Jia Zhang, one of the 5 dragons, had actually suffered a loss from a single strike. Although it was just a scratch and would not affect his battle prowess, among those of the same age level, how many people could injure Jia Zhang? Even if Jia Zhang was careless, Ling Han's strength had to be strong enough. "I've really underestimated you." Jia Zhang wiped away the bloodstains on his face. His eyes were slightly red. He was truly angry now. However, Ling Han said, "I'm not weaker than you. I only have this little bit of strength." Damn, too arrogant. Not only was Jia Zhang furious, the other 4 dragons could not tolerate it either. They were the 5 dragons, and Jia Zhang being belittled was equivalent to them being dragged down as well. Naturally, they were displeased and dissatisfied. Again, Jia Zhang said coldly. This time, he would learn his lesson, and would no longer engage in close-quarters combat with Ling Han. A martial artist had cultivated qi, and this was the most powerful weapon. How could he possibly unleash the full might of qi if he was in close-quarters combat? Grandmaster Ling. It was at this moment that a shout was heard from the top of the stairs. Tung tung tung. A short and round fatty ran down from above. This person was really too fat, so fat that he did not even reach his legs. Thus, everyone looked like a meatball rolling down from the stage. This was undoubtedly very funny, but no one could laugh because this was a heavyweight figure of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. His figure was heavyweight, and his identity was similarly heavyweight. 7th Pavilion Master Yin Shuiyang. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion of the Middle State had a total of 9 Pavilion Masters. These were truly powerful figures that could stand on equal footing with the leaders and grand elders of ancient sections. These 9 Pavilion Masters were all elites of the Heaven Tier. It was said that there were Shattering Void Tier elites overseeing the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, but no one had ever seen one. A dignified elite of the Heaven Tier actually personally appeared to welcome a Grandmaster Ling. Then what kind of existence would this Grandmaster Ling be? Earth-grade high-level alchemist. No, Earth-grade high-level alchemists probably did not have such qualifications. They had to be heaven-grade alchemists, but the problem was that there were not only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in this world, and neither of them had the surname Ling, alright? Wait, there was indeed a heaven-grade alchemist with the surname Ling, but he came from the North region, and it was said that he even obtained the inheritance of the 12 palaces, and knew the whereabouts of a divine treasure trove. This heaven-grade alchemist had also come. Where was he? Everyone craned their necks to look around. Naturally, none of them thought of Ling Han. He was too young, so how could such a youngster possibly be some grandmaster? The meatball rolled down, and the people along the way hurriedly moved out of the way. However, this meatball rolled too quickly, and some people could not dodge in time and were instantly sent flying, dancing in the air like scarecrows. But Yin Shuiyang did not have the slightest intention of stopping. This was the Heaven Tier. They could be so willful. The 5 dragons were all shocked, and hurriedly moved to the side of the road. They did not have the slightest qualification to challenge a Heaven Tier elite. Not to mention them, even if the person with the highest status in their clan came, when they saw Yin Shuiyang they could only obediently listen. Thus, if they were to be sent flying, then they could only blame it on their bad luck. But Ling Han did not dodge or evade. Who did this brat really think he was? If he was killed by a Heaven Tier elite, he would definitely die in vain. Who asked him to be so blind? The meatball speed was too fast, and in an instant it had already closed in on Ling Han. Everyone shook their heads. Obviously, Ling Han was also going to be sent flying. But at this moment the meatball Yin Shuiyang suddenly braked and stopped in front of Ling Han. A smile appeared on his round face, and because he was too fat, his neck could not be reached at all. It was as if a large ball was on top of a small ball, extremely comical. No one dared to laugh. To laugh at a Heaven Tier elite's appearance in front of his face, that was truly seeking death. Ling Han, however, laughed loudly. With each laugh everyone's lips twitched, feeling a chill rise from the bottom of their hearts. Later, Yin Shuiyang better not fly into a rage. If a Heaven Tier elite flew into a rage, then blood would flow like a river. Unexpectedly, Yin Shuiyang also laughed along with him, and he seemed to be quite happy. Master Ling has graced us with your presence. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. Yin Shuiyang bowed. Everyone felt a strong sense of dizziness. A dignified Heaven Tier elite actually bowed to a mere flower blossom tier. Were their eyes blurred? And Master Ling, this guy was Ling Han. The 5 dragons' expressions immediately became extremely ugly. Chapter 553. Oh, this youngster was actually a heaven-grade alchemist. What kind of joke was this? However, a mighty Heaven Tier elite wouldn't deliberately put on such a show just to tease them juniors. Then they really thought too highly of themselves. Everyone couldn't help but think of what Ling Han said before. Later, even if Jia Zhang and the others knelt before him and kowtowed in apology, Ling Han might not even pay attention. At that time it sounded like a wild boast, but now everyone believed it without a doubt. Heaven-grade alchemist, what kind of awesome existence was that even Heaven Tier elites had to kneel down to greet? The importance of their identity and status was evident. A mere flower blossom tier junior really wasn't even fit to carry their shoes. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You're too polite, how should I address you?" How big of a shot was this guy, and even Yin Shuiyang came out to greet him, yet he didn't even know who he was. This was an act. Ha 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 ha, Yin Shuiyang. I'm the 7th Pavilion Master of Spirit Treasures Pavilion. If Grandmaster Ling doesn't mind, you can call me Little Yang, Yin Shuiyang said with a smile. Everyone instantly felt a chill run down their spine. With this guy's physique, who could call him Little Yang? However, how many people in this world had the right to call him Little Yang? Aside from a few supreme shattering void tier beings, there were probably only a few high-level heaven tier elites. 7th Pavilion Master. Ling Han also felt a chill run down his spine, and couldn't call him Little Yang no matter what. Grandmaster Ling wants to participate in today's auction? Yin Shuiyang asked. Exactly. Ling Han nodded. Please please. Yin Shuiyang hurriedly made a gesture of invitation. Ling Han walked forward and instantly made everyone, especially Jia Zhang and that profligate young master, feel relieved. However, Ling Han stopped again and said to Yin Shuiyang, 7th Pavilion Master, if I settle a score with a few people, would it appear as the strong bullying the weak? Yin Shuiyang's expression immediately darkened, and he said, oh, could it be that someone offended Grandmaster Ling? One wants to call him Grandpa, another wants me to be his follower, and a few of them want to beat me up, said Ling Han with a smile. Hearing him say so, Jia Zhang, Wu Long, and that profligate young master were about to cry. How could they have known before that Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist? Otherwise, even if they were given 10,000 guts, they would not dare to say such words. Who is it? Yin Shuiyang's gaze swept over, and a frightening pressure instantly swept over him. At this moment, he was no longer an amiable fatty, but an elite of the heaven tier who could make heaven and earth tremble with a stomp of his foot. Everyone felt their souls trembling, and they couldn't muster up any will to resist. Ling Han nodded to himself. This fatty's cultivation base was likely at level 4 or 5 of the sky human stage. Ling Han himself was incapable of sensing it. At any rate, he only possessed a strand of the divine sense of a sky human stage cultivator. Jia Zhang and the other 4, as well as that profligate young master, all stood up trembling and knelt on the ground saying, we beg for Grandmaster Ling's forgiveness. Ling Han, however, acted as if he hadn't seen them, and started to talk with Yin Shuiyang without any substance, obviously giving Jia Zhang, Wu Long, and that profligate young master the cold shoulder. Indeed, they all knelt down, but whether or not they accepted their apologies depended on Ling Han's mood. The 5 dragons looked at each other, hardened their hearts, and started to slap their own faces. When the profligate young master saw this, he hurriedly kowtowed as if pounding onions, really afraid that Yin Shuiyang would kill them all in a fit of rage. Grandmaster Ling, the auction is about to begin. Why don't you go inside and take a seat? Yin Shuiyang said. He didn't want so many people to gather at the entrance of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. After all, it wasn't a good influence. Ling Han only smiled at Jia Zhang, Wu Long, and that profligate young master, walked up the stairs and entered the main hall. Jia Zhang, Wu Long, and that profligate young master broke out in a cold sweat. Although Ling Han didn't blame them, offending a heaven-grade alchemist wouldn't end up so easily. Under Yin Shuiyang's lead, Ling Han came to a private room, which was also the most luxurious private room in the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. At present, only Ling Han received such an honor on this floor. Normally, this kind of top-class private room would only be used for special auctions that would be held once every decade or so. It was specially reserved for shattering void tier elites and existences with similar statuses, such as heaven-grade alchemists. Towards this kind of empty reputation, Ling Han was already very indifferent. He wasn't startled by the honor and sat down in the private room. As expected, the auction only took a short while before it began. After Yin Shuiyang accompanied Ling Han for a while, he bid farewell and left, and very generously gave Ling Han an overdraft limit of 100,000 3-star origin crystals. In reality, a heaven-grade alchemist's net worth would be more than this amount, so why was the limit set by the other party so low? It was simple. Perhaps shattering void tier elites wouldn't care about the inheritance of the 12 palaces, but the divine treasure trove was too important. If he was targeted by a shattering void tier elite, then Ling Han would definitely be doomed. Thus, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion naturally wouldn't invest too much on this unstable point. To be able to give a limit of 100,000 3-star origin crystals, the Spirit Treasures Pavilion was actually very, very generous. Ling Han sat, One item after another was auctioned off, but there were also some that weren't sold. As expected of the once-a-month large-scale auction, there were many items of all kinds, but Ling Han didn't bat an eye at any of them. On the other hand, there was an auction like this once a month, so there couldn't be too many precious items. Perhaps, after another month, there would be shocking treasures taken out in the end-of-year super auction. Ha ha ha! A sudden burst of laughter sounded in the auction hall. Ling Han was originally sleepy, but after hearing such a loud commotion, he couldn't help but go over, only to see that the auctioneer was actually holding a brick. Ling Han also wanted to laugh, but then he thought that the Spirit Treasures Pavilion wouldn't go overboard and use a brick to fool people, so he went over carefully. This actually wasn't a brick, but its shape was very similar. However, if he looked closely, he would discover that the edges were irregular, as if it had originally belonged to another gigantic stone, and now it had been knocked off. One side of the brick was flat, but the other side actually had half a word, or perhaps just a few remnant strokes, but he couldn't tell what exactly it was. This brick has been carefully examined by several great appraisers of our pavilion, but they couldn't analyze its specific structure or use. They can only confirm that this was once on a stone tablet, and has at least 100,000 years of history. Additionally, this stone is very hard, and it was obtained from some ancient site. The auctioneer introduced. He seemed to be unable to find the merits of this brick, and could only brag as much as he could. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, but still could not see anything special about this brick. Only those few words on it made him feel as if something had come alive in his heart. Somewhat interesting. The starting price is 10 origin crystals, the auctioneer said. Obviously, he didn't have much hope for this item. 20, 50, 100. Although he temporarily didn't know what use this brick had, in at least 100,000 years of history, there were still many people who were willing to take it back and collect it. 1,000. Ling Han opened his mouth. If the quality of the origin crystal was not specified, then it was only 1 star. To Ling Han, a 1-star origin crystal was really not a big deal. 2,000. Someone made a bid, and it actually sounded somewhat familiar. Chapter 554. Mu Fei Yao. Ling Han suddenly remembered. The people of the Cold Spear Association, which he suspected had been founded by his disciple, had once fought to the death with an old man for the sake of an alchemy furnace that he had once used, spending money like flowing water. He had not thought that she would also come, and on this brick at that. Wait, she wouldn't be purposefully bickering with him, right? The Cold Spear Association supported the Ling Han of 10,000 years ago, and was naturally filled with malice towards the Ling Han who had appeared now, thinking that he was also called Ling Han and was also an alchemist, which was a blasphemy to the Ling Han of 10,000 years ago. So now that she recognized his voice, it was not impossible that she was purposefully bickering with him. Heaven-grade alchemists could cover for the majority of the time, but they were not omnipotent. For example, towards the Cold Spear Association, they worshipped the Ling Han of 10,000 years ago to death, so naturally they would mercilessly look down on the current him. More importantly, the Cold Spear Association seemed to be very rich. 3,000. Ling Han increased the price. 5,000. Mu Fei Yao followed up without hesitation. Granny, didn't he spank her butt to her satisfaction before? Why was she opposing him now? 10,000. Ling Han increased the price as well. 20,000. Mu Fei Yao increased the price even more delightedly. In a short while, this broken brick was actually pushed up to the price of 100,000. One had to know that the starting price of this thing was only 10 origin crystals. As expected, even if it was only a piece, as long as there were 2 people who liked it, it could still be sold at a price of gold. Ling Han was not afraid. 1-star and 2-star origin crystals were no longer of much use to him. They were meant to be spent in the first place, and 3-star origin crystals were meant to be saved to increase his cultivation. Thus, as long as it was within this range, he did not mind squandering money like it was dirt. As a heaven-grade alchemist, he really did not care about money at all. She continued bidding, and only when the price reached 1,000,000 origin crystals did Mu Fei Yao finally stop, only smirking coldly. This woman was definitely doing this on purpose. Though Ling Han did not care about money, he was still very displeased that the price was pushed up by someone and he had to spend an extra 1,000,000 origin crystals. In the future, if this woman knew his true identity, the expression on her face would be very funny. He thought maliciously in his heart. When the time came, he would make her kneel and call him Grandmaster. Very soon, the people from the Spirit Treasures Pavilion brought the brick over. With Ling Han's status, he could have put the bill on their tab first, but since he had money in his hands, he didn't want to take advantage of them, so he directly paid with origin crystals. He picked up this brick and examined it closely. This thing was definitely made of stone, but it was really very sturdy. Not only was Ling Han unable to break it, even if he took out the demon birth sword to hack at it, it was useless. He couldn't even leave a mark on it. He wondered what the effect would be if he let Hunyo bite him. With a thought, Ling Han stored the brick into the black tower, and asked through his divine sense, "Small tower, what material is this? Do you think I'm a know-it-all?" Small tower immediately said proudly, "I've lost all of my previous life's memories, so how would I know what this rock that doesn't contain a shred of origin energy is?" Still so proud after losing your memories, Ling Han ridiculed in his heart. Pong, 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 the rock spirit ran over impatiently, staring at the brick with its mouth wide open. If it could drool, it would definitely have formed a river by now. A mastery? It sent its divine sense to Ling Han. "Alright, I'll give it to you. However, this thing is very hard, so don't break your teeth," Ling Han said indifferently. Although he bought it with 1,000,000 origin crystals, he was never stingy when it came to his own people, though the rock spirit could hardly be called a human. The rock spirit was overjoyed, and hurriedly pounced to bite. With a kacha it bit down and actually cracked open the head with brute force. This was because it used too much force and the brick was too hard. The result was that the brick didn't shatter, but its head was shattered. Fortunately, it could split into many pieces and turn into many small stone people. Moreover, for a rock spirit, the human form was just a form. The head and chest were not vital points at all. They were no different from arms and legs. Thus, countless pieces of rubble immediately flew back, once again gathering on its head and restoring itself. The rock spirit still didn't give up, and started to bite again, but without exception, it couldn't chew through this brick at all. If it used too much force, it would break itself. And after a few times, its recovery speed became slower and slower. Ling Han was a bit worried that it would really torment itself and die here in order to become stronger, so he hurriedly put away the brick and said, "You can't refine this rock at all now. When you become stronger in the future, I'll give it to you to eat." The rock spirit knelt on the ground with a paw, its arms continuously pounding the ground, causing the ground to tremble as if it was crying bitterly. Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. He didn't think that this large rock would be quite human-like, even showing a depressed expression. However, the rock spirit specialized in refining strange rocks, and after it fused with the rocks in the divine temple of the 12 heaven mystery realms, its cultivation increased greatly. It was now in the 7th layer of the flower blossom tier, yet it couldn't even refine a tiny bit of the brick, which showed how high this brick was. He took out the brick again and observed the few strokes on it. Although he couldn't make out what kind of characters it was, it exuded an air of grandeur, a kind of heaviness that had passed through the ages. He played with it casually, thinking that this thing would be good for smashing people since it was hard enough. The auction continued and a few ancient martial arts techniques appeared, obtained from ancient sites. To Ling Han's surprise, there were 2 ancient sites that were actually from the era of his last life, but now became antiques that were being fought over. He couldn't help but feel rueful. He dreamt for 10,000 years, and when he woke up everything was the same, but the people had changed. Looking at the whole world, there was no one he was familiar with anymore. He had to reach the shattering void tier as soon as possible, then shatter this void and become a god, then compete with Sword Emperor and the others. And Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, she liked him but didn't tell him, playing some flirtatious game. He definitely had to spank her butt. The auction ended successfully. Because there was still a month until the super auction at the end of the year, the auction items this time weren't all that precious, and the good things would be left for that time. Ling Han knew that the news of his appearance had definitely spread throughout Million Treasure City. At this moment, there might already be heaven-tier elites lying in ambush in the dark, wanting to capture him quietly and force him to reveal the inheritance of the 12 palaces as well as the information regarding the divine treasury. It couldn't be helped. although he was a heaven-grade alchemist, who told him to rise too quickly and not form his own force. Otherwise, if he had over a dozen heaven-tier elites following him, then apart from shattering void-tier elites, which force would dare provoke him? He exited the private room, and after arriving in a corner, he directly entered into the Black Tower. He changed his appearance, and when he appeared again, he openly blended into the crowd and swaggered out of the auction house. Then, he calmly returned to his residence, and actually, not a single person became suspicious of him. Who would have thought that he would be hiding in the Spirit Treasures Pavilion? It's called Darkness Under the Lamp. Chapter 555. Multitasking wasn't a difficult thing for martial artists, but to unleash two high-level secret techniques to their fullest potential would be difficult. Ling Han first began to deduce the earth-overturning seal, so that it could be unleashed with a single hand. The difficulty wasn't in the technique. In truth, mystical powers didn't have techniques, or at least that was the case for the 4 mystical powers that Ling Han had learned. Mystical powers mostly taught you how to circulate origin power and conform to a certain specific pattern, but as for how to unleash it, it was completely up to you. For example, if the earth-overturning seal was unleashed, then both hands would be covered with special vein-like patterns. Its power lay in these vein-like patterns, which possessed an incomparably terrifying destructive power. The annihilating dragon star arrow was the same, concentrating the vein-like patterns on the arrow's body to shoot out a destructive arrow. Thus, this archery technique didn't even need a real bow and arrow. Using one's body as the bow and origin power as the arrow, one could unleash an extremely powerful destructive power. What Ling Han needed to do was to combine the vein-like patterns that were originally distributed on both hands onto one hand. He painstakingly deduced, and time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed, and he finally revealed a smile. His left hand opened, and the vein-like patterns were densely woven. What was strange was that the demonic patterns actually resonated and combined with the earth-overturning seal. Although the two are completely different, why do I discover that there are similarities? Ling Han felt that it was strange. This is the power of regulations. Small Tower appeared. Regulations? Ling Han mumbled. Small Tower had said long ago that the demonic patterns were formed from the regulations of a realm. He only knew that they were very powerful, but he didn't know why. He said, "Come, explain in detail." "I have no such obligation." Small Tower was very proud. However, the so-called mystical powers can all touch the edge of the power of regulations, so you should properly cultivate these mystical powers. It will be of great benefit to you. Even if it didn't say it, he knew. Ling Han was very gloomy. This damned proud tower didn't treat him as its master at all. There would come a day when he would stuff it into a latrine pit and make it reflect on itself properly. He exited the Black Tower, but saw that the great army that the Flame King had originally stationed had already disappeared, and a flag representing the Purple Moon Empire was planted on top of the city walls not far away. Obviously, the Flame King had already taken down this city, and continued his pace of expansion. Ling Han released everyone from the Black Tower, and headed towards the city. He wanted to scout out the situation. As it turned out, the Lunar King brought another great army over half a month ago, and joined forces with the Flame King. The two great elites launched a fierce attack, and completely defeated the forces guarding the city, forcing the allied forces of the 5 great sects to retreat once again. Recruiting. On the streets, a soldier was currently shouting loudly, "Join our Purple Moon Army, and you'll have the chance to learn high-grade martial arts techniques and cultivation techniques. Those who pass by and want to become friends with the elites, you mustn't miss this opportunity." Ling Han couldn't help but want to laugh. Ma Duobao wasn't reliable, and the soldiers under his command weren't very reliable either. This recruitment slogan really made one unable to help but laugh. However, using cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques as an enticement, it just so happened to be really attractive. Many people were stuck in a certain cultivation level. It wasn't because they didn't have enough talent, nor was it because they didn't have enough resources, but because they lacked a higher level cultivation technique. This cultivation technique of mine can only be cultivated up to the deity transformation tier, so how am I supposed to cross into the heaven tier? Although there were indeed spiritual medicines in this world that could allow a martial artist to reach the heavens in a single step, the amount was really pitifully small, and one would need to have nature-defying luck to obtain them. However, the luck of the majority of people was very ordinary, and high-grade cultivation techniques were viewed as treasures by the various great forces. If one wasn't a true disciple or a core clansman, they couldn't cultivate at all, and it was very difficult to obtain a high-grade cultivation technique. That was why so many people went to ancient sites to explore. Wasn't it for the sake of breaking through the shackles in the future? Now, the Purple Moon Empire used cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques to recruit soldiers, which naturally attracted people. Ling Han also wanted to know the real situation of the Purple Moon Empire, so he said, "Come, let's go and enlist in the army." They walked over, and Ling Han said, "Little brother, if we enlist, we'll be able to learn high-grade cultivation techniques." "Of course, as long as you're able to achieve military merits," the soldier said. "Oh, how so?" A considerable number of people had gathered in the surroundings. The soldier cleared his throat and said loudly, "I've already explained how to obtain cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques many times, but every time there would be new friends coming over, so I'll still continue to explain. Those who haven't heard of it before, please listen carefully. In our Purple Moon Army, there are a total of 5 levels of official titles, which are King, General, Colonel, Captain, and Soldier. As long as you can enlist, you'll be the lowest rank soldier. Soldiers can learn any 6th-layer cultivation technique, which will allow you to steadily advance into the flower blossom tier." "Hiss!" everyone exclaimed in shock. It was the first time that most people here had heard of this, so they naturally couldn't help but be shocked. Even if this was the middle state, where martial arts were the most prosperous, flower blossom tier cultivators would be able to transcend mortality and possess an additional 200 years of lifespan. Anywhere they went, they would be able to be called an elite, and they would be able to be put in an important position no matter which force they entered. But it was precisely because of this that level 6 cultivation techniques were not easy to obtain. Who knew how many people were stuck at the spiritual pedestal tier? Firstly, they didn't have enough talent and resources, and secondly, they didn't have a cultivation technique, so how could they transcend mortality? Most importantly, advancing into the flower blossom tier would give them an additional 200 years of lifespan. This surpassed any kind of longevity spirit medicine, so who wouldn't want to? That soldier snickered and said, however, "It's not that easy to become a soldier. One has to at least be in the spiritual ocean tier. And after becoming a soldier, after every battle or completing a mission, military merits would be calculated. Once the military merits have reached a certain level, one would be able to be promoted from soldier to captain, and for a captain, one would be able to obtain a complete level 7 cultivation technique and an earth-grade martial arts technique. Similarly, accumulating military merits would allow one to continue to be promoted, becoming a colonel, general, or king. If one becomes a king, all secret techniques can be chosen, and even mystical powers can be cultivated." Mystical powers. Everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. Although the majority of them didn't know what mystical powers were, with the word divine in it, how could it not be awesome? I'll sign up, I'll sign up." Everyone raised their hands. The soldier chuckled and handed out a piece of paper to everyone. The word conscription was written on the paper. He said, "Take this paper to the training camp in the north of the city and take the test for new recruits. Only if you pass will you be able to enlist. Moreover, you'll only be reserve soldiers. You'll have to complete your training before you can officially become soldiers. Otherwise, you'll only be sending yourselves to your deaths on the battlefield. You should know that our Purple Moon Army has always been famous for its low casualties." Everyone dispersed in an uproar. Although they weren't supreme elites, they were still potential elites of the spiritual ocean tier or spiritual pedestal tier. Could it be that they couldn't even become ordinary soldiers? Ling Han also asked for 2 conscription orders. He kept one for himself, and handed the other to Zhu Xian. He said, "Let's go play as well. Forget about Hu Niu." She would listen obediently. They set out towards the north of the city. After exiting the city, there was a mountain peak not too far away. At the foot of the mountain was a military camp. The flag of the Purple Moon Empire was raised, and a large group of people surrounded the entrance. Chapter 556. Pu Linghan instantly spat out a mouthful of wine. If Fatima said he wanted to establish some force and sweep through the whole vast lands, then Linghan wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Such ambitious people were innumerable in history, and it wouldn't be strange if there was another Ma Duobao now. However, this Ma Duobao shouldn't have such powerful strength, right? Although Linghan couldn't see through him, his cultivation couldn't possibly reach the shattering void tier no matter how he thought about it. Splitting open the skies. There were gods all around, and although this god wouldn't punish evil, if the balance of heaven and earth was destroyed, it would transform into the Eye of Heavenly Tao and appear, or even directly erase such an existence. Linghan said something similar before, and ended up provoking the Eye of Heavenly Tao, but Hunyo scared it away. Thus he didn't dare to speak carelessly now. Some things should be known in his heart, and it was better not to speak carelessly before he had enough strength. Fatty, you're really ambitious, Linghan said ruefully. But allow me to ask, what's the meaning of this? Ma Duobao grinned and said, shattering void tier, breaking open the void. So only one person can become a god. Tanned brother, don't you think it'd be better to simply split open this sky and let everyone enter the realm of gods, letting everyone be like dragons? Linghan choked. This was a shocking ambition. Splitting open the sky and let everyone enter the realm of gods. Is that possible? He asked. Never tried. How would you know if it's possible? Ma Duobao said indifferently. Unexpectedly, this damn fatty actually had such ambition and the domineering desire to help the world, wanting to bring everyone into the realm of gods. Linghan asked himself if he'd ever thought of this problem. Since ancient times, becoming a god had always been a personal matter. How could it be possible for even chickens and dogs to ascend to heaven? But thinking again, if it really could split open the sky and split open the earth, then he could really bring the people around him to ascend to the realm of gods. As long as he was strong enough, Linghan pondered. It seemed that it was very difficult for gods to descend to the lower realm, or else the legends of gods wouldn't be heard all the time in the vast lands. He obtained Shuexian's memory stone, and saw and heard with his own eyes that gods would be suppressed and rejected if they entered the lower realm. Clearly, breaking through the world was very difficult. Fatty, let me give you a toast. Linghan raised his glass. Regardless of whether he was willing to join or not, just Ma Duobao's ambition was worthy of his respect. Ma Duobao gladly clinked cups with him, and the two of them downed the fine wine in one gulp. Black brothers. Alright, my name is Linghan. Just call me by my name. Alright, my tan brother. Ma Duobao readily accepted his advice, but he did not even think of changing his words. Have you ever thought about why there was a gap in history 10,000 years ago? Linghan could not help but feel shocked. He thought of Shuexian and then thought of his last life. At that time he didn't have any suspicions at all. But now that he thought about it, there was a gap in the history of his past life about 9,000 years ago. Many inheritances of martial art were annihilated in history, including the Tao of Alchemy. It was even worse for the Tao of Arrays. It was almost wiped out. If one were to calculate it, the era in which he lived was destroyed by a great disaster. In fact, it happened to be 1,000 years later, which was another 10,000 years. Every 10,000 years, there would be a great disaster in the vast lands. Also, Shuexian left a message saying that 10,000 years was a huge lie, meaning, was it related to the great disaster every 10,000 years? He pondered for a moment and then said, Does Brother Ma know? I do know, but walls have ears, so I can't say it out loud, Ma Duobao said seriously. Walls, where were the walls and where were the ears? Linghan did not understand, and only looked at Ma Duobao. Ma Duobao raised a finger and pointed at the sky. Eye of Heavenly Tao, Linghan said in surprise. Ma Duobao shook his head and raised his hand again. Linghan was stunned for a moment, and then instantly came to a realization. The Eye of Heavenly Tao was the guardian of this realm, high above. Then what about the realm of immortals? Why was the realm of immortals monitoring this realm? Moreover, the enemies that Shuexian encountered were her clansmen in the realm of immortals. Those people mentioned the topic of the extinction of the human race, and seemed to be the main culprit of the great disaster 10,000 years ago. What made Linghan confused was that it wasn't easy for the realm of immortals to destroy the lower realm. Even if immortals would be suppressed in the lower realm, Wouldn't it be fine if a few more came? After all, there were only so many shattering void-tier elites in the vast lands, but how many immortals were there in the realm of immortals? Tan brother, 10,000 years is a cycle. In another 100 years or maybe only a few decades, another great disaster will descend. If we don't think of something, then the tragedy of 10,000 years ago will repeat itself, Ma Duobao said. It can't be. Zhu Xian'er had been listening quietly all along, but finally couldn't help but exclaim. This topic was too shocking. On the other hand, Helian Sun Shui and Hunyou didn't care at all. One of them lost her memories, and the other was a child, completely without the concept of world destruction. Ling Han asked, "Does Brother Ma know the source of all this?" "I can't say." Ma Duobao shook his head and pointed at the sky. Ling Han was surprised and said, "Could it be that announcing it aloud would lead to a great disaster? If the whole world were ignorant people, then it would obviously be easy to rule," Ma Duobao said with a smile. "So, even smart people have to pretend to be ignorant. Tan brother, your talent is shocking, and you'll definitely become a great person in the future. But you have to remember that the strong will break. There are too many elites in the world, and before you have enough power to protect yourself, you must remember to conceal your strength and bide your time." Ling Han nodded and said, "Thanks for the reminder. Then, Tan brother, are you interested in joining me in a righteous cause?" Ma Duobao asked. My current strength is still too weak. Let's talk about it when I reach the heaven tier." Ling Han refused. He obviously wouldn't disregard everything and step onto the pirate ship just because the other described a grand plan and outlined a great ambition for him. Ma Duobao didn't try to persuade him anymore, and only patted Ling Han's shoulder and said, "Tan brother, I believe you'll definitely make the right choice. Oh right, it's not peaceful these days, so you better stay in the city. Also, take this spirit talisman and use it at the most dangerous time. It can save your life." He threw a spirit talisman at Ling Han, and without waiting for Ling Han to ask any further, he'd already floated away. Ling Han and Zhu Xian'er were still savoring his last words. What did they mean? Damn fatty, Niu's meat. Niu screamed. Ma Duobao could leave, but he actually took all the roasted meat on the barbecue rack. How could she not feel heartache? Ling Han comforted her, and took out the meat to roast again. He and Zhu Xian'er looked at each other, both a bit worried. Ma Duobao's words revealed shocking news, and that was that the great disaster that almost destroyed the vast lands 10,000 years ago might happen again. Also, that fatty said don't go out of the city these days. It's not peaceful outside. What does that mean? Ling Han rubbed his chin, feeling that damn fatty was really unreliable, only saying half a sentence for everything, and making him guess on his own. Zhu Xian'er was also baffled. Only Hunyou and Helian Sun Shui were carefree, happily roasting meat on the side, craving it very much. Oh. Chapter 557. A night passed, and Ling Han and the three girls returned to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Although Xianyuan Ziguang said he would kill him when he came out, he obviously wasn't so free to keep an eye on him all day, or else a great battle would be unavoidable. At noon, Yinhong ran over in a hurry. "What happened? Why are you in such a hurry?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Pa, I'm a virtuous lady. How can you describe me as being in a hurry?" Yinhong said with dissatisfaction. "A virtuous lady who talks about me all day. This is the first time I've seen one," Ling Han said with a smile. "Then you've seen it," Yinhong said unabashedly. "Oh right, there's something important for you." "What is it?" Ling Han asked casually. "In the past few days, no one has entered the city," Yinhong said. "That counts as something important?" "Why not? Do you know what kind of place Million Treasure City is? How many people go in and out every day?" "Millions, but only people go out now and no one comes in. The entire city is much more desolate. Go to the Great Hall outside, and see how many fewer guests there are," Yinhong said in one breath. Ling Han suddenly remembered that Ma Duobao said yesterday that it wasn't peaceful outside recently, and it was best to stay in Million Treasure City. Could it be that damn fatty knew the reason, and so intentionally warned him? "Do you know why?" Yinhong shook her head and said, "I sent out a few groups to scout out the situation, but they didn't return either." She paused and said, "Maybe Million Treasure City has already been targeted by some force, and they set up an ambush on the main road. One can only leave but not enter. Ling Han knocked on the table and said, "What force would do this, and what benefit would it bring them?" The Spirit Treasures Pavilion did business, and the Alchemist Society concocted pills. The two working together could allow medicinal pills to circulate throughout the continent, which was beneficial to martial artists. Who would destroy it? Even if ancient sects like the Heaven Sword sect and the Cloud Phoenix sect had their own alchemists, there was no need to do such a thing, right? That's why we have to investigate, Ing Hong said. Ling Han glared at her and said, "You're thinking about me? Don't you want to know who did it?" Ing Hong said, "Even if the sky collapses, there will naturally be someone tall enough to hold it up. I'm merely in the flower blossom tier, so what does it have to do with me?" Ling Han said indifferently. However, Ing Hong did not smile anymore. She said, "The situation this time is really a little unusual. The communication stones in the city can no longer be used to contact the outside world. Now, people can only leave but not enter. Million Treasure City seems to have become an isolated city, completely unaware of what's happening in the outside world. Aren't there experts of the Heaven tier? Just let them go," Ling Han said. "Some people speculate that this might be a huge conspiracy. Even if a Heaven tier elite appeared, they might also be targeted. Million Treasure City's protective formation is the best, and as long as there's enough origin crystals to support it, even shattering void tier elites can't break in," Ing Hong said. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "So, Heaven tier warriors are afraid of death, so Flower Blossom tier warriors are sent to die. That's not true. Although Flower Blossom tier warriors are weak, elites wouldn't care, so maybe it's not dangerous." Ing Hong revealed a worried expression. "The main thing is that Million Treasure City has become blind and deaf, completely unaware of what they're going to face next. They have to ask for help from the outside world." Ling Han sighed. "Why couldn't it be peaceful wherever he went? Does this count as me being dragged down by you?" he said with a smile. "Haha, now that you've boarded this old lady's pirate ship, just obediently accept your fate." Ing Hong laughed wildly in cooperation. However, this really wasn't any good news. A few days later, the situation became more and more unfavorable, because when one raised their head, they could see that the entire sky had disappeared, and what replaced it was a black fog that shrouded the sky. This time, everyone felt that something was wrong, and the atmosphere in the city instantly became anxious and uneasy. Ling Han took out the spirit talisman that Ma Duobao gave him, and couldn't help but think that this damn fatty should have long known that such a situation would happen, which was why he told him not to leave the city in the near future. Obviously, this wasn't the end. There would be even more dangerous things that would happen. This spirit talisman could save his life. Ling Han smiled. Ma Duobao obviously didn't know that he possessed the Black Tower, and this was his strongest life-saving trump card. However, this spirit talisman couldn't be wasted, because the thing that Ma Duobao took out definitely wasn't simple. This should be an instant teleportation talisman, he speculated. In any case, he was a Heaven tier elite in his previous life, so he could guess a little from the patterns on the spirit talisman. An instant teleportation talisman. Although I deceived many people and made them think that I possessed an instant teleportation talisman and not the Black Tower, I never thought that I really obtained one. Even in my previous life, I couldn't make this thing. Apparently, it had to be a shattering void tier elite who understood the secrets of the void to be able to refine it. Ma Duobao, truly a treasure trove. Did this guy obtain an ancient treasure trove? His wealth is truly shocking. This guy's strength is unfathomable, and I don't know where he ran off to now. Ling Han decided to leave the city. Sitting and waiting for death wasn't his style, though he had the Black Tower and could turn danger into safety no matter how desperate the situation was. Moreover, he was also very curious. This was Heaven Treasure City, and there were Heaven tier elites keeping watch, but someone actually dared to have designs on it. How powerful was this force? He had the three girls enter the Black Tower. Otherwise, if something happened in Million Treasure City after he left, it would be too late for regret. However, the problem was that only Zhu Xian'er was willing to listen obediently, and Helian Sun Shui couldn't be stored in the Black Tower, or else Ling Han wouldn't have to worry. Meanwhile, Hu Niu refused to enter the Black Tower, pestering him to be with her. It couldn't be helped, they'd go together. Anyways, Hunyeo could enter the Black Tower at the most dangerous time, and Hellion Sun Shui was a heaven-tier elite, so in a life-and-death situation, she might erupt with instincts and recover terrifying strength. The city's Great Formation was already activated to defend against unknown dangers, but it was a small matter to go out because now everyone hoped that someone would go out to investigate, and they were just worrying that no one would volunteer. The three successfully left the city, and a black fog filled the air ahead, affecting their vision. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, but it was useless. The fog was thick, and even the Eye of Truth couldn't see through it. It probably wasn't that the Eye of Truth wasn't powerful enough, but that Ling Han's tier was a bit low, affecting the effect of the Eye of Truth. Be careful, Ling Han said, and simply let Zhu Xian'er out. Taking people into the Black Tower was only a matter of thought anyway. The four of them walked forward. Soon the black fog surrounded them, and their visibility was reduced again. They could barely see things 3 meters away. Ling Han was slightly better, but he had only reached a height of 6 meters. What formation is this? Zhu Xian'er asked. Among the three girls, only she was more reliable. Hellion Sun Shui's intelligence was touching, and Hunyeo was a child. Ling Han's expression was solemn as he said, "If I didn't guess wrong, this is the 4th killing formation." Phone reading was more refreshing. If it was a battle of the same tier, he had the confidence not to lose to anyone. However, not only was Xinyuan Ziguang's tier much higher than his, but his battle prowess was also extremely outstanding. In reality, he was in a weaker position. Xinyuan Ziguang didn't waste words, and directly shot out a palm from afar. Hong, a sea of fire spread out, sweeping wildly towards Ling Han. Ling Han used the Demon Fairy Step and charged towards the opponent. His tier was much lower than the opponent's, and it would be foolish to pull away and exchange blows with the opponent. In battle, one obviously had to display one's strengths. Using one's weakness to meet the opponent's strength was really too unwise. Dream on. Xinyuan Ziguang sneered. He also used his movement technique, pulling away from Ling Han while launching powerful attacks, taking the complete initiative. His talent in martial art really wasn't below Ling Han's, and even surpassed it in some aspects. At least 22 flashes of qi at present, he was number 1 among the younger generation. Under the amplification of the spirit qi of heaven and earth, it was as if 23 of him were attacking Ling Han together, truly shocking. Ling Han dealt with it calmly. He had many trump cards: 2 Demon Birth Sword, Thunder Battle Armor, Body of Iron Sheet. Which one of them couldn't turn the tide of battle? He also sneered and said, "Since you don't dare to fight in close combat, try this move." His figure retreated continuously, instantly pulling away a distance of 30 meters from Xinyuan Ziguang. Previously, he had been trying to close the distance between them, and this sudden retreat was naturally out of Xinyuan Ziguang's expectations, causing the opponent to pause slightly. He didn't counterattack immediately, fearing that this was a trap. Once he advanced, Ling Han also leaped forward. My cultivation is higher than yours, and my origin power is denser than yours. With distance, you're even less of a match for me, Xinyuan Ziguang said proudly, and with a palm strike 23 fire tigers appeared, pouncing towards Ling Han. It was merely 30 meters. This bit of distance couldn't exhaust his origin power at all. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "You think too highly of yourself." He made a drawing motion and instantly a speck of light appeared, immediately turning into the shape of an arrow. It shot towards Xinyuan Ziguang. Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. As fast as flowing light. Xinyuan Ziguang was greatly shocked, and hurriedly activated his origin power to protect himself. This arrow shot into his chest. Fortunately, his origin power shield activated in time, blocking this arrow. Even so, it still made him groan, so uncomfortable that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. In terms of power, he was obviously above Ling Han, but Ling Han concentrated his power on a single point, while he had to set up defenses all over his body. This naturally couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. It couldn't be helped. This arrow was too fast, and he had absolutely no idea where it would shoot at him. Left with no choice, he could only defend himself. Ling Han calmly retreated, shaking off the 23 fire tigers, and said with a smile, only as a. Xianyuan Ziguang's face was filled with sullen anger. No matter tier or battle prowess, he should be able to firmly suppress Ling Han, but he suffered a small loss under this one strike, making him feel that his pride had been wounded. For a godlike man like him, it had always been only him who defied tier to defeat other geniuses. How could he be defied by someone else? He was furious and flames appeared on top of his head, turning into ancient mystical beasts such as true dragons and true phoenixes, displaying an extremely special bloodline. "You're dead for sure," he declared coldly. Ling Han laughed and said, "You really know how to boast. Who didn't know how to format?" Hong! Just at this moment, the black fog actually surged, and faintly visible were actually sabers, swords, axes and battle axes, densely interwoven with terrifying vein-like patterns, surging with a shocking cold light. Ling Han's expression changed, and he immediately ran towards the city. Xianyuan Ziguang was furious. Seeing that he had shown his might, this brat actually gave up the battle. He was just about to scold him, but when he saw this transformed black fog, he instantly felt a chill in his heart. Similarly, he exerted force in his legs and ran towards the city gates. The fourth killing formation had been activated. Heaven tier was heaven tier after all. He burned his life force source and his speed was actually ridiculously fast, reaching a level comparable to Helion Sun Xue's. However, this kind of consumption was irreversible. What was consumed was his lifespan, at least losing a few dozen years of his lifespan. However, compared to being killed on the spot by Helion Sun Xue, losing a few dozen years of his lifespan naturally didn't matter. If Helion Sun Xue wanted to chase, it was fine. She could also similarly burn her life force source, and she would definitely be able to catch up. However, she obviously wasn't willing, and only chased for 2 steps before stopping, turning around to look for Ling Han. "My lord, thank you very much for your help. The Purple Moon Empire will definitely have a gift of thanks, but if you want to harm Ling Han, you'll have to pass through me first." Xiao Yongnian stood horizontally in front of Helion Sun Xue. This was the belief of the Purple Moon Empire. As the boss, he had to protect the underlings, or else how would the underlings risk their lives for you? Helion Sun Xue reached out with a wave of her hand, and Xiao Yongnian was pushed to the side by her. She stopped in front of Ling Han, her gaze flickering as if she was hesitating about something. "Hainyo, if there's anything, we can sit down and slowly talk about it. There's nothing that can't be discussed," Ling Han said with a smile. He had already put away the stone tablet. The rock spirit was about to break through to the deity transformation tier. And if it could refine this stone tablet, heaven tier wouldn't be far away. Only then could it be considered a hired thug. Helion Sun Xue reached out and picked Ling Han up. "Xiao," she turned around and left. "Silly Nyo, silly Nyo." Hu Nyo jumped out and hurriedly chased after her. She could care less about anything, but she definitely wouldn't allow anyone to snatch Ling Han away. "Little girl, wait for Uncle Rabbit." Rabbit hurriedly chased after her. Zhu Xianair wasn't slow either, but her cultivation was the weakest, so she could only fall behind. Xiao Yongnian struggled to get up, but felt a pain in his chest. How could he catch his breath in one go? Instantly he sat down on the ground. None of the new soldiers dared to chase after her. That was a heaven tier elite, and if they chased after her, wouldn't they just be sending themselves to die? She didn't go on a killing spree, and that was already a mercy beyond the law. "Don't think your life is too long, return to camp." Xiao Yongnian also knew that it was unrealistic to let these new soldiers chase after him. The only plan now was to report the news. Although it was only a new soldier, the Purple Moon Empire definitely wouldn't allow anyone to bully one of their own. An elite would definitely rush over, perhaps a general or even a king. Xiao Helion Sun Xue grabbed onto Ling Han and advanced continuously. Her speed was astonishing, and even if she was holding onto Ling Han, she didn't slow down much. After walking for a very long time, she finally stopped and threw him onto the ground. Ling Han didn't hide inside the Black Tower. If Helion Sun Xue wanted to kill him, she wouldn't have brought him along and fled. He dusted off his butt, stood up and said, "Your temper has grown again." Helion Sun Xue glared fiercely at him, and suddenly struck out violently. Pung pung pung, it was a beating. Similarly, although her attacks were heavy, none of them were killing moves. Thus, Ling Han only used all his strength to protect his handsome face. As for the rest, just beat her. He just felt it was strange that this Hainyo was becoming more and more abnormal. After Helian Sun Shui beat him enough, she finally stopped. She took off her cloak, and there was actually a baby wrapped on her back. At the moment, the baby was sleeping soundly, and even stuck out a finger in his mouth, sucking on it, looking very cute. No wonder she didn't forcefully clash with that stone tablet earlier. It should be because she was worried that she would hurt the baby. Otherwise, with her strength and temper, so what if she took it head-on? Could this be her son? Helian Sun Shui held the baby for a while, then handed him over to Ling Han and said, "Take good care of him. If he loses even a strand of hair, I'll kill you. Kill you 10,000 times." Ling Han subconsciously took it, then scratched his head and said, "I don't seem to have the habit of raising other people's children." Had this Hainyo's head been smack silly again? She actually wanted him to raise a child? "This is your son," Helian Sun Shui said angrily. Chapter 560. Could it be that Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Alchemist Society joined hands to plot against us? Someone with persecutory delusions exclaimed. Yin Shuiyang sneered and said, "To kill trash like you, would there be a need to go through such a big circle? This lord can crush you 10,000 times with a stretch of his hand." This was indeed very reasonable, causing many agitated people to calm down. The key was that Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Alchemist Society had no reason to do so. Spirit Treasures Pavilion's 8 pavilion masters, as well as Alchemist Society's 2 heaven-grade alchemists and heaven-tier elites. Did they go to some ancient site together? Ling Han suddenly asked. Yin Shuiyang once again glanced at Ling Han, revealing a look of surprise. Although this young man had interrupted twice, appearing to be very unruly, every question he asked was on point. He nodded and said, "That's right. The pavilion received news that the ancient tomb of the ancient alchemy emperor, Ling Han, has been discovered, and within it are the treasures collected by this alchemy emperor in his lifetime." Everyone was in an uproar. 10,000 years ago, Ling Han was a legend. Not only was he amazing in alchemy, but he also stood at the top of the world in martial art. His wealth was shocking, and just thinking about it made people envious. Now that his ancient tomb was discovered, who could resist not making a move? Ling Han's expression was strange. Ghost, in the previous life, he was directly turned into ashes by the Black Tower in the process of exploring. Where was there an ancient tomb to bury him? This was clearly a trap. After luring out the elites of Million Treasure City, they took the chance to besiege the city. But to concoct such a big conspiracy just to kill them, these shrimp soldiers and crab generals, even if there were still Yin Shuiyang and the other heaven-tier warriors, but to set up the 4th killing formation just to kill a few heaven-tier warriors, this was clearly not worth it. No, there must be a bigger plot, but he just didn't think of it. Now this is just a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. I hope the pavilion masters and the 2 masters can return safely. Yin Shuiyang sighed. He obviously also thought of it. Things were too coincidental, and there must be a trap. Since the enemy hiding in the dark had deliberately set up such a big trap, it was unlikely that reinforcements would arrive in a short period of time. We can only rely on ourselves now. Yin Shuiyang cupped his fists and said, "Brothers and sisters, please be generous and help Little Yang protect Million Treasure City. Million Treasure City is also our home. We will do our best." A voice drifted out from the city. It was incomparably old, but it was also filled with power. It caused many people's legs to tremble, and they couldn't even stand steadily. "Little Yang, when it's time to act, we will definitely not stand idly by." She was an old lady, but her voice was as tough as steel. Many people who heard her had tears of blood flowing out of their eyes. They were simply unable to endure such pressure. "N." The third voice sounded, but it was only a simple reply. These were the few heaven-tier forces in the city. Of course, this was also due to the special nature of Million Treasure City. Otherwise, not every city in the central province would have a heaven-tier powerhouse. Yin Shuiyang couldn't help but feel relieved. There were pitifully few shattering void-tier elites in the whole world, and heaven-tier elites were enough to be considered extraordinary. Now that there were 4 great heaven-tier elites joining hands, It obviously made him full of confidence. Besides, the mysterious enemy used the fourth killing formation to besiege. Didn't this mean that the other party didn't have Shattering Void tier power? Otherwise, even if there were 4 Heaven tier elites here, how could they block it? With that in mind, he naturally felt a little more confident. In Ling Han's eyes, however, he shook his head. This hidden force definitely had Shattering Void tier elites, or else how could they be so daring? Besides, if there wasn't Shattering Void tier power, how could they set up the fourth killing formation? The other party's Shattering Void tier elite probably went to restrain the Spirit Treasures Pavilion's Great Pavilion Master, making him unable to rush back in time. All in all, the current Million Treasure City was indeed in imminent danger. Hong Long Long, the fourth killing formation operated continuously. Black swords, black sabers, black spears, and all kinds of weapons appeared one after another, blasting at the Great City Guarding Formation. The Great City Guarding Formation only condensed into a shield to block, simple but effective. The first day passed in everyone's panic, and on the second day when everyone raised their heads, they were all dumbstruck. Yesterday, the fourth killing formation only sent out one weapon to attack the Great City Guarding Formation, but today there were 2 which caused double the destructive power, and naturally caused double the consumption of origin crystals. The only reassuring thing was that the Great City Guarding Formation could still hold on. Originally, the condensed shield could withstand 10 hits before shattering, but now it shattered in 5 hits, and as long as it didn't shatter in 1 hit, then they didn't have to worry about the city gates breaking open and the killing formation arriving. Everyone's expression was very solemn. Yesterday there was 1 attack, today it was 2, so would it become 3 tomorrow? And the day after that it would be 4? If it kept increasing like this, the Great City Guarding Formation would always have a limit. As expected of the fourth killing formation, Ling Han also looked cautious. If he didn't have the Black Tower, then since he couldn't save the others anyway, he would directly tear apart the instant teleportation talisman and run, but now he had the ability to save everyone in the city. If he still chose to only protect himself, there would be a threshold in his heart that he couldn't cross. Saving people was as easy as lifting a finger for him, but this would expose the secret that he possessed the Black Tower. And at that time, how many people would target him? Wait, my real body is already targeted by countless people anyway. Even if it's exposed that I still possess a spatial spirit tool that can accommodate living things, so what? Ling Han thought the other way around. A spatial spirit tool that could accommodate living things and the Black Tower were 2 different things. He'd make people who were taken into the Black Tower lose consciousness, and they wouldn't know where he went in this period of time. Alright, if it's a time of danger, I'll appear with my original appearance, bring everyone into the Black Tower, and then leave with the instant teleportation talisman. Ling Han made up his mind. With this clear thought, his mood instantly became cheerful. On the 3rd day, what everyone was worried about happened. The fourth killing formation simultaneously developed 3 weapons, which all blasted at Million Treasure City. This time, the shield condensed by the Great City Guarding Formation was blasted apart in 3 hits. The atmosphere in the city was oppressive, and order began to go out of control. That night, several vicious incidents occurred. There were robberies, murders, and ravages of women. Under the doomsday-like repression, the beastly nature in many people's hearts was released. If they were going to die, why not die after doing whatever they wanted? The city became more and more chaotic, and more people joined in this kind of revelry. At first, it was just ordinary people, and later, the weaker martial artists also joined the ranks of the villains, making the disaster even more terrifying. If this continued, without the fourth killing formation breaking through the city, Million Treasure City would already be courting its own destruction. The powerful forces in the city joined hands to enforce the law, killing many villains, and this chaotic situation was finally under control. Fortunately, on the 5th day, the fourth formation didn't produce 5 more weapons. Instead, it was fixed on 4. Everyone felt slightly at ease. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 561. Even if it was only 4 weapons moving at the same time, it was still very terrifying. The shield formed by the Great Guarding Formation could only withstand 2 hits before shattering loudly. The daily consumption of origin crystals became an astronomical figure. Even if the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and the Alchemist Society were rich, they could only last for over a month with such consumption. After a month, what to do? Time arrived on the 10th day. Someone appeared in the eastern city. When the news spread, everyone swarmed to the eastern part of the city. They climbed up the city wall and saw 10 young men and women standing outside the city. Behind them, there was a stooped old man with white eyebrows and beard. Who are you people? Why did you trap us here? What do you want to do? Everyone shouted. These 11 people didn't look like they barged in by mistake. Yin Shuiyang also came to the city wall. He looked at the old man below with a solemn expression. Unfathomable. This person was definitely in the heaven tier, and his tier wouldn't be lower than his. The 11 people on the other side were cold and had no intention of answering, appearing very arrogant. May I ask how we've offended you to activate such a killing formation and trap us? Yin Shuiyang asked. This was an elite of the heaven tier. The old man on the other side said, in Million Treasure City, there's an item that my sect is determined to get, but we don't know where it is. When looking for it, it would inevitably alarm people, so we simply surrounded this place and killed everyone. Naturally, no one would be a hindrance. There was actually such a reason. Because they were afraid that others might be a hindrance, they laid down a killing formation and slaughtered a city of people. Was there such a deranged person? After everyone heard, they instantly broke out in curses. But some people thought, for such a force to not hesitate to activate the fourth killing formation and besiege an important place like Million Treasure City, then how precious must that item in Million Treasure City be? This force doing so was equivalent to becoming enemies with the entire vast lands. It wasn't like the 8 pavilion masters of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, and the 2 heaven-grade alchemists of the Alchemist Society would never return. After they found out, would they leave it at that? In terms of size, the combination of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and the Alchemist Society should be the most powerful existence in the vast lands, right? To offend such a force so easily, it was enough to prove how precious that thing was. Oh, what is it? Why don't we help you find it and you can remove the fourth killing formation? Yin Shuiyang smiled. Although he was a great expert, the blood of a merchant flowed in his veins, so he was naturally used to haggling. There's no need to go through so much trouble. We still want to collect it ourselves. Furthermore, our sect is very fond of this place. In the future, we plan to turn this place into our sect's birthplace, said the white-browed old man. Oh, may I ask what your esteemed self's name is? And what is your esteemed sect's name? Yin Shuiyang asked. The white-browed old man revealed a frightening smile and said, My surname is Bai, and my name is Yuan. As for my sect, you should have heard of it. Oh, then why don't you say it so that everyone can admire you? Yin Shuiyang asked. There's no need to say anything. Do it yourself. Bai Yuan sneered. He waved his right hand and with a rumble a strange sound rang out. The 7 coffins suddenly slid out of the black mist as if they had grown legs. They slid all the way to his feet before stopping. 1,000 Corpse Sect. Instantly a few people exclaimed at the same time. Gagaga. Our sect will borrow this Million Treasure City to announce to the world that the 1,000 Corpse Sect has returned. Bai Yuan laughed loudly. Hearing his arrogant laughter, the people on top of the city walls didn't speak, feeling the atmosphere extremely oppressive. The 1,000 Corpse Sect came back so brazenly, wanting to destroy the entire Million Treasure City, and these people would be used as a sacrifice. Ling Han also shook his head inwardly. If the 1,000 Corpse Sect chose Million Treasure City as the location of their sect's revival, then this fourth killing formation would probably never be removed. In the future, it would be the 1,000 Corpse Sect's Great Mountain Protecting Formation. These 10 great killing formations all had one similarity. The killing formations formed by heaven and earth didn't need origin crystals to maintain. As long as the formation was set up, the power of heaven and earth would naturally pour in, forming a terrifying killing tribulation. Used as a great mountain protecting formation, it would truly be the best in the world. Don't say that you won't have a chance to live. Bai Yuan cackled. These 10 people are the 10 personal disciples of this sect's sect master, and now they're here to choose followers. As long as you're chosen by the 10 young masters, you can live. These 10 young men and women were all proud, but surprisingly, they obviously didn't have the fluctuation of corpse chi on them. Unlike Bai Yuan, who had a stooped figure and was surrounded by death chi. A green-robed youngster said, "In the same age level, whoever can block 10 moves from me is qualified to be my follower." Haha, 7th junior apprentice brother, you actually want someone to block 10 moves from you? Have you been slacking off recently? Has your cultivation regressed? Laughed a violet-robed youth. Whoever can block 5 moves from me can become my follower. He obviously thought that he was stronger, and there weren't many who could block 5 moves from him. These youngsters were indeed very strong. All of them were in the flower blossom tier, and a few were even in the high stage of the flower blossom tier, not weaker than Xianyuan Ziguang. Hung street rats dare to be so arrogant. Let me try you guys. Jia Zhang already leaped down the city gates, and said proudly, I don't want to be your follower. I'm just not pleasing to the eye, and want to find someone to slaughter. Who will die? Good. On top of the city walls, many people instantly cheered. This 1,000-corpse sect trapped them with a killing formation, and not only wanted their lives but also humiliated them like this. This obviously made many people's blood boil, and they only wanted a vigorous battle. However, some people had other ideas. The current situation was obviously that the 1,000-corpse sect had the advantage, and a fine bird chose a tree to nest in. Merely in the second layer of the flower blossom tier, who will go? The 10 disciples of the 1,000-corpse sect asked each other, and finally turned to a youngster who just reached 20. 17th junior brother, your tier is the lowest, so I'll leave this to you. The youngster was a bit bashful, and walked out amidst the crowd's jostling, standing face to face with Jia Zhang. Die! Jia Zhang immediately attacked. He stretched out his right hand and turned it into a golden dragon claw, pressing towards the youngster. Hong, the dragon claw grew with the wind, turning into a terrifying existence that was as long as 9 meters. Patterns glowed, drawing in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to gather, enlarging once again, reaching the level of 300 meters. Hong, the dragon claw pressed down as if a true dragon was drawn out, wanting to suppress the mortal world. You barely have some ability. The youngster nodded and moved to face the dragon claw. Once he made his move, the special characteristics of the 1,000-corpse sect were immediately displayed. A black-colored evil chi swirled, turning into a terrifying skull that opened its huge mouth and bit towards the dragon claw. Hong! Chapter 562. The two fought fiercely, and for a moment, it was hard to determine who was superior. On top of the city wall, everyone was excited. This 1,000-corpse sect boasted to the skies, but the result was nothing more than this. One had to know that although Jia Zhang was one of the 5 dragons in terms of seniority, he definitely couldn't enter the top 100 in the young generation of the middle state. Only Xianyuan Ziguang, Yao Huiyu, and the others represented the limit of the young geniuses of this generation. The 1,000-corpse sect was an ancient great sect, but the disciples they nurtured were only SOSO. Come on, too many years had passed and this sect had declined. If not for the 4th killing formation, they definitely wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow. Ling Han shook his head and said, Jia Zhang lost. His voice wasn't low, and many people on the side heard it, and couldn't help but be annoyed. Hey, whose side are you on? Why are you hoping for Jia Zhang to lose? You can't be a spy of the 1,000-corpse sect, right? I'm suspicious. These people all stared at Ling Han with unfriendly gazes. Zhu Xian'er was smart, and immediately understood Ling Han's meaning, and said, that person is a disciple of the 1,000-corpse sect, and the true battle prowess of the 1,000-corpse sect is corpse soldiers. Hearing Zhu Xian'er's explanation, everyone instantly understood. Yes, why was the 1,000-corpse sect notorious, spurned by the world, and even exterminated several tens of thousands of years ago? It was because they refined corpse soldiers. Where would corpse soldiers come from? The martial artists they killed, or the corpses of elites stolen from the graveyard? Without corpse soldiers, the 1,000-corpse sect was a second-rate sect, but with corpse soldiers, the 1,000-corpse sect could compare to powerful forces like the Heaven Sword sect and the Cloud Phoenix sect, or even surpass them. Now that youngster only relied on his own battle prowess to fight Jia Zhang, so what would be the outcome after he drew out his corpse soldiers? Ling Han saying that Jia Zhang lost was definitely not nonsense, nor was he standing on the 1,000-corpse sect's side. He was speaking the truth and there were facts to rely on. However, Jiazhong, the person involved, didn't react at all. He was still fighting fiercely with that youngster, and the two just happened to be evenly matched, so he fought to his heart's content. Being suppressed in the city for 10 days made him extremely displeased, and he needed a great battle to vent. 17th Junior Brother, why isn't it done yet? Too slow. That's right, when will this fight end? The 9 youngsters of the 1,000 Corpse sect all shouted. The young man revealed a cruel smile and said, since senior brothers and sisters are getting impatient, then this little brother will quickly end this battle. He let out a long whistle, and an ear-piercing sound came from the distance. 4 coffins simultaneously slid over. Everyone in the 1,000 Corpse sect raised corpses, and the stronger one was, the more corpse soldiers they could raise. For example, he was in the Flower Blossom tier, so he could raise at most 6 corpse soldiers, but this requirement was too high. 4 was already his limit, and a normal Flower Blossom tier disciple could only raise 1 or 2. Corpse soldiers needed to divide their divine sense to control. The more divine sense they divided, the greater the impact on their body. Therefore, unless they were exceptionally talented, it was better to focus on quality before quantity for corpse soldiers. Come out! The young man shouted, and 4 corpse soldiers immediately leapt out of the coffin. Each of them had rotted to the point where only their skeletons remained, but their bones had been refined to a bright silver color, as if they had been forged from metal. A 3rd-tier silver-armored corpse was equivalent to the Flower Blossom tier. The young man stared at Jiazhong and said, you're too weak, not qualified to be C2 Yao's follower. Bullshit. Jiazhong was furious. Although he didn't want to be the young man's follower at all, he couldn't stand the young man's scornful attitude. He let out a long whistle, and a mirror appeared in his hand. Aged gold mirror. He shouted loudly and waved the mirror. Instantly, a golden light surged and shone towards C2 Yao. C2 Yao faced it coldly, without any intention of dodging or parrying. However, a corpse soldier stepped forward bravely, blocking that golden light. With a sizzling sound, a hole immediately appeared on the corpse soldier's ribs, and gas came out. So powerful. Although the corpse soldier's physique couldn't compare to rare metal of the same tier, it was still considerably tough, but it was actually pierced through with a single strike, which showed how terrifying this spirit tool was. C2 Yao, however, didn't care at all. He pointed at Jiazhong and said, kill him. Instantly, 4 corpse soldiers pounced towards Jiazhong like wolves and tigers. The 1,000 Corpse sect was feared and hated by various great forces in ancient times, and there was indeed a reason for this. Not only because of their vile behavior, but also because of their strength. In terms of individual battle prowess, C2 Yao and Jiazhong were only evenly matched, but once the corpse soldiers appeared, the battle prowess of both sides was on a completely different level. The 4 corpse soldiers were all in the 9th layer of the Flower Blossom tier, and were refined in various ways. Their physiques were tough, and they didn't fear death or pain. They were completely human-shaped weapons. Which Flower Blossom tier cultivator wouldn't be scared upon seeing them? Although Jiazhong unleashed that aged gold mirror and his battle prowess soared by a large margin, facing 4 corpse soldiers in the 9th layer of the Flower Blossom tier, he was truly stretched thin and couldn't deal with them at all. Weak, truly too weak. The 10 disciples of the 1,000 Corpse sect all shook their heads, appearing to be beneath contempt. On top of the city wall, everyone was silent. Jiazhong really wasn't weak. He was only in the 2nd layer of the Flower Blossom tier, but his own battle prowess reached 7 stars, and after unleashing the aged gold mirror, his battle prowess directly soared to 10 stars. However, his opponents were too strong and there were too many of them. The 4 corpse soldiers all had battle prowess in the 9th layer of the Flower Blossom tier, and they didn't fear death or pain. Their defenses were tough, so how could he play? Soon he was in imminent danger, and would definitely be killed in less than 10 moves. Enough, Yin Shuiyang said in a low voice. Bai Yuan laughed and said, this is a spar between the younger generation. Why should the older generation interfere? Chapter 563. Before returning, Ling Han purposely went to see the Rain Emperor to tell him about this matter, and also obtained the Rain Emperor's approval. The Rain Emperor wrote a letter for him to deliver to Qi Changyu on his behalf, so that the latter could cooperate with Ling Han. When it came to splitting open the skies, Ling Han would not care about Qi Changyu's feelings. Whether he was willing or not, he would have to abdicate the throne. Ling Han set out on his journey alone, while the others began to pack up. They were going to move again. In the future, when Ling Han ascended to the throne, his family would naturally have to live in the imperial palace. The desolate north was pitifully small in Ling Han's eyes now. He transformed into lightning, his speed astonishingly fast. In less than half a day's time, he had arrived at the Rain country. He did not hold back, and directly barged into the imperial palace. How dare you? You actually dare to barge into the imperial palace? Die! Ling Han did not bother to hide his tracks, and just walked casually. Immediately, he attracted the attention of the guards, who all moved to attack him. Pa, but these people had just raised their weapons when they all fell to the ground, their faces pale and their bodies twitching continuously. Ling Han had only released a little bit of his aura, but he was now at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, so was this little bit of aura not awesome enough? Previously, Feng Yan had almost swept through the imperial city with a spiritual infant tier law decree. What more when Ling Han had personally come, so who knew how many times stronger he was? As he walked, the crowd also fell to the ground. They were completely unable to resist Ling Han's aura, and could only prostrate themselves on the ground and tremble in fear. Sir, this is the imperial palace of Rain country. An old man appeared. His cultivation level was in the spiritual pedestal tier, and he actually managed to resist Ling Han's aura. Obviously, this was a king tier of martial arts. Otherwise, he would have long since surrendered without a fight. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, I'm here to see Qi Changyu. How dare you? The spiritual pedestal tier cultivator was enraged, and pointed a finger at him. You actually dare to directly address His Imperial Majesty by name, how disgraceful. Ling Han said, Are you stalling for time, waiting for that old Rain Emperor to appear? He sensed for a moment and said, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. The old Rain Emperor should have gone mad. Not to mention coming out of seclusion to fight. I'm afraid he won't be able to last more than 3 days. Bullshit. The spiritual pedestal tier cultivator shouted. Don't even think about shaking the army's morale. The old emperor is protected by the fate of the nation, and his divine arts are unparalleled. How could you deceive him with just a few words? Is that so? Ling Han smiled. After sensing for a moment again, his origin power condensed into a large hand, and grabbed towards a certain place. Pong, a heavy sound was heard, and then there was a hubbub of voices. Not good. His Imperial Majesty has been captured. The formation is completely unable to withstand a single blow. A large hand has directly broken through the formation, and captured His Imperial Majesty. Where's the old emperor? Quick, summon the old emperor. The imperial palace was in a state of chaos. The soldiers, eunuchs, and palace maids were all shouting in confusion. Pong, the imperial palace above Ling Han's head shattered, and a large hand of lightning also retracted, holding a young man dressed in a dragon robe. Who else could it be but the former 7th imperial prince, Qi Changyu, and the current Rain Emperor? That spiritual pedestal tier cultivator was so shocked that he almost spouted bile. What kind of ability was this? He had not moved at all, yet he had captured His Imperial Majesty, and had even broken through a formation. That was a flower blossom tier great formation, and even if a flower blossom tier cultivator personally came, they would need to blast it for a while before they could break through it, and this amount of time would be enough for the old emperor to rush over to face the enemy. But now it was completely unable to withstand a single blow. How strong had this person become? Ling, Grandmaster Ling. When Qi Changyu saw Ling Han's appearance, his heart instantly calmed, and his panic disappeared. Ling Han put Qi Changyu down, smiled and said, It's really not easy to see you now. Haha, Grandmaster Ling must be joking. Qi Changyu laughed loudly. Having sat on the imperial throne for a few years, he naturally possessed the magnanimity of an emperor. At least this superficial act was done very well, appearing calm and unruffled. However, just by looking at his legs that were still trembling, One could tell that he had really been quite frightened just now. Let's not talk about this for now. The old Rain Emperor's situation is not looking good, Ling Han said. Qi Chongyu was shocked. He was also very uneasy because a period of time had passed since he had been captured, yet the old Rain Emperor still showed no reaction. This was definitely not right. Ling Han's figure floated and he had already disappeared. However, with a flash of lightning he very quickly returned. In his hand was an emaciated old man who was about to turn into a tree trunk. Though his whole body was very tall, his current weight did not exceed 25 kilograms at most. Grand Elder. Qi Chongyu immediately took a step forward. Old Emperor, that spiritual pedestal tier cultivator also exclaimed in shock. If it were not for the fact that he had seen him many times before, he really would not be able to believe that this was the old emperor. Fine, fine, fine. You've lucked out. Ling Han smiled and shook his head. He drew out a ginseng that was as thick as a child's arm. The ginseng was covered with purple-veined patterns that were filled with the truth of the great Tao. This was dragon blood tyrant ginseng, and it just so happened to be ripe. He had harvested a large batch in one go, but he had never thought that the first person to taste it would actually be the old Rain Emperor. The latter's lifespan had already dried up, and he had eaten too many spirit medicines that could prolong his life. Even if he was given a ton of 1,000-year-old ginseng, it would be of no help. Thus, if he wanted to continue living, then the only way was to increase his cultivation level and steal his lifespan from the heavens. With the support of the power of the nation, though the old Rain Emperor had the power of the flower blossom tier, he was not a true flower blossom tier cultivator, after all. His lifespan would at most increase by 100 to 150 years. Chapter 564. Four corpse soldiers charged together, blasting towards Pang Xiangming. All of them exuded a strong evil aura, like demons crawling out of hell. In a sense it was indeed so. Corpse soldiers and corpse chi were of the same origin, and now that these four corpse soldiers absorbed Si Tuyao's natal corpse chi, their power instantly skyrocketed. Meanwhile, Si Tuyao looked a bit dispirited, obviously greatly exhausted. Just a few skeletons, what can they do to me? Pang Xiangming sneered, and the moon-shaped mark on his forehead shone brightly. His hands danced, and the four corpse soldiers were imprisoned again. Break, he shouted, and with a chi la, the two corpse soldiers' hands and feet were torn off. Such strong power. One had to know that after corpse soldiers were tempered, their bodies were extremely tough, constantly approaching the height of rare metals of the same tier. And how close one could get depended on the degree of tempering and the materials added. The corpses of elites were only higher-level raw materials, and if one wanted to refine a corpse soldier, a powerful corpse soldier, one naturally had to pay a great price. Si Tuyao's four corpse soldiers definitely couldn't be considered the best among flower blossom tier warriors, but it wasn't easy to refine them into third-tier silver-armored corpses, yet two of them were instantly destroyed by Pang Xiangming, which was enough to prove Pang Xiangming's extraordinariness. Damn it! Si Tuyao roared, and the four corpse soldiers pounced again. Corpse soldiers didn't feel pain anyway, and losing a limb would only slightly affect their battle prowess. He himself joined the battle, attacking Pang Xiangming together. Pang Xiangming should win, right? Zhu Xianer asked Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and said, if Si Tuyao doesn't have any other trump cards, then Pang Xiangming's victory is assured. He'd made several judgments which already convinced many people, and they all settled down. Although almost no one here knew Pang Xiangming, now that everyone was in the same boat, they all hoped that Pang Xiangming could win. Some people simply wanted to fight for their honor, while others thought that after Pang Xiangming won, there would be 10 places to leave the city, so could they get one over? Originally, everyone was united and willing to fight to the death for the sake of survival. But when a chance of survival appeared in front of them, it caused many people's thoughts to change. As expected, Pang Xiangming was even better. After a few dozen moves, he defeated the four corpse soldiers and gave Si Tuyao a heavy palm strike, but he didn't kill him. After a black corpse aura swirled, Si Tuyao retreated into the crowd and spat out a mouthful of black blood. His expression was extremely weak. Haha, 17th junior brother. You're not fated to be my follower. A black-robed young man laughed heartily. He strode out and said, I am Bian Hao, the 14th disciple under the sect master. Pang Xiangming looked coldly at the black-robed young man and said, Move aside. He still owes me 3 kowtows. Youngster, don't tell me you don't want those 10 spots to leave? Bai Yuan interrupted. No, Pang Xiangming refused without hesitation. Damn, are you stupid? Many people on the city wall immediately cried out in their hearts. You don't want to give it to me? Fuck, where did this idiot come from? He's actually willing to die here just to fight for his honor, what a moron. Ling Han, however, clapped his hands and revealed a smile. This Pang Xiangming had quite a personality and was worth saving. He watched coldly from the sidelines. Some people he planned to save, while others were only fit to turn into mud here. Since you're willing to give up these 10 spots, it's up to you. Bai Yuan laughed. However, if you win you have to kowtow. That's just your wishful thinking, he didn't agree. So deceitful. But thinking about it carefully, it was true that the bet of 3 kowtows was only Pang Xiangming's one-sided statement. Siti Yao didn't agree. Wishful thinking wouldn't work, right? Otherwise, with so many beauties in the world, wouldn't he be able to take any one of them home? Pang Xiangming revealed an angry expression, but didn't flare up. Instead, he pointed coldly at Feng Hao and said, Then I'll kill you. Kill me? You don't have the right, right? Bian Hao laughed loudly. He had the cultivation of the 4th layer of the flower blossom tier, a level higher than Siti Yao, but the 1,000 corpse sect relied on corpse soldiers. How many corpse soldiers he had and how strong they were was the key. Sounds of friction were heard as 4 coffins slid over at the same time. Pung 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 pung, 4 corpse soldiers jumped out, obviously 3rd-tier silver-armored corpses. Unless they had 3 lives corpse caskets, they couldn't control corpse soldiers that surpassed their own tier. This showed how terrifying 3 lives corpse caskets were. Pang Xiaoming obviously wouldn't be afraid, charging towards Bian Hao. However, the 4 corpse soldiers immediately met him, waving their skeletal hands and stirring up a terrifying gale. Obviously, these 4 corpse soldiers were stronger. They probably reached 13 stars of battle prowess, Ling Han said with a nod. So powerful! Zhu Xian'er exclaimed. After a martial artist died, there was only a corpse left. Even if it was refined, it was already quite impressive to be able to display battle prowess that matched one's tier, and to surpass 1-star level. This corpse was too extraordinary when it was alive, so it had to be refined at a great cost. No matter what, Bian Hao's 4 corpse soldiers were really strong, gradually suppressing Pang Xiangming, making him unable to attack Bian Hao again. Pung! Blood actually flashed out of Pang Xiangming's waist. Bian Hao held a dagger in his hand, and blood was still dripping from the dagger. He licked his tongue, revealing a bloodthirsty malevolence. Just now, it was his successful sneak attack that gave Pang Xiangming a blow. However, under such circumstances it couldn't be considered a sneak attack. The 1,000 corpse sex people and corpses were one, and it could only be said that the 4 corpse soldiers gave Pang Xiangming too much pressure, creating an opportunity for Bian Hao to strike. Ha ha ha! Bian Hao laughed loudly. You've already been poisoned by my corpse, and only by submitting to me can you be saved. Otherwise you'll slowly be corroded by corpse qi, turning into a corpse soldier that only knows bloodthirst. Pang Xiangming ignored him and directly flew back to the city wall. He sat down, took out a pill bottle from his spatial ring, poured out a few soybean-sized medicinal pills, and consumed them, starting to circulate to expel the corpse qi. Chapter 565. Shit, he didn't forget to pick up girls even when he was out. However, a few young ladies from famous sects nearby were so excited that their eyes shone, and they all clasped their hands on their chests, desperately calling out Xianyuan Ziguang's name as if they wanted to pounce on him. Idiot! Ling Han shook his head. Idiot! Helian Sun Shui imitated him and stuck out her tongue. After all, she had to add her own characteristics. Next time you see this idiot, just beat him up, Ling Han egged. But I'm afraid my hand will hurt, Helian Sun Shui said weakly. Ling Han thought for a moment, took out the brick, stuffed it into her hand and said, then use this to hit him. Helian Sun Shui was instantly delighted and said, "Okay." She held the brick and even tested the strength of the swing, looking eager to try. Xinyuan Ziguang got snubbed, and his expression couldn't help but darken. No matter in martial art or love, he'd always been successful, but now he couldn't completely suppress Ling Han in martial art, and didn't conquer Helian Sun Shui in love, which made him very displeased. Wait until he swept away these 1,000 corpse sect dregs in one endless glory. Xinyuan Ziguang leaped down, looked at Bianhao proudly and said, "If you can block one of my moves, I'll spare your life." So arrogant. One had to know that Bianhao had 4 corpse soldiers, and reached 13 stars of the Flower Blossom Tears battle prowess, yet he still couldn't block one of Xinyuan Ziguang's moves. Bianhao was obviously furious. He was the 1,000 corpse sect master's personal disciple, and his eyes were on top of his head, but now he was actually looked down upon like this. How could he endure it? He was about to attack, but felt a weight on his shoulder, and was already pressed down by someone. It was Bai Yuan. "Venerable Bai, please let me fight," he said. Bai Yuan shook his head and said, "You're not his match, let the third go." "What?" 1,000 corpse sect's disciples all exclaimed. Although they didn't all come today, the third, which was the 1,000 corpse sect master's third disciple, Zhu Tiangu, was the strongest in their group. "I'm going to play my strongest card." Is he really that strong? Zhu Tiangu had been pretending to sleep the whole time, and finally opened his eyes at this time. He stared at Xinyuan Ziguang for a while, his face revealing a hint of belligerence, and said, "This person is a decent opponent. I don't have absolute confidence in winning." Bianhao and the others were shocked once again. Even third senior brother said so. Was Xinyuan Ziguang really that strong? Second senior brother should be able to win easily, and there's no need to even mention eldest senior brother. His innate talent is exceptional, and even if all of us were added together, we still wouldn't be able to beat him. Zhu Tiange smiled. Bianhao and the others nodded in unison. They believed Zhu Tianji's words without a doubt. One must know that all of them were geniuses as well, but they worshipped that eldest senior brother so much. They wondered just how strong that person was. Zhu Tiange walked out with large strides. His figure was not very tall, but he was very sturdy. At first glance, he looked a bit like a woodcutter in the mountains. "Where are your corpse soldiers?" Xinyuan Ziguang asked. "When it's time to use it, it will naturally appear." Zhu Tiange said lightly. Xinyuan Ziguang sneered and said, "If you don't use corpse soldiers, you'll be instantly killed by me." "Haha, then I can only blame myself for being inferior." Zhu Tiange laughed loudly. When experts fought, they fought with wits first. Obviously, Xinyuan Ziguang didn't dare to underestimate Zhu Tiange, or else he wouldn't have needed to use words to provoke him, and would have directly attacked. Xinyuan Ziguang put one hand behind his back and said, "Since you don't use corpse soldiers, I'll let you use one hand." This madman. Zhu Tiange revealed a hint of anger. The other wanted to use one hand to force out his corpse soldiers. How confident was he? He snorted, opened his mouth and reached in with one hand, actually drawing out a black-colored long sword. What the hell was this? Everyone on top of the city wall was shocked. "You're so you poor that you don't even have a spatial ring, actually hiding a sword in your body." Ling Han, however, revealed a hint of astonishment, and mumbled, "In the legends, nurturing a tool with one's body is actually true? What's nurturing a tool with one's body?" Zhu Xian'er asked. She and Ling Han both disguised themselves, so she obviously didn't call herself Xian'er or Ling Han as Big Brother Han or Young Master Han. Nurturing a spirit tool in the body, constantly nurturing the spirit tool with one's own chi and blood, can make the spirit tool stronger, even nurturing a tool spirit. Ling Han said, but immediately shook his head, and said, "No matter what kind of spirit tool it is, from the moment it is formed, it exists for battle. It is a very dangerous object, and if it is nurtured in the body, it is very likely that it will kill itself first." Nurturing a tool with one's body was a risk, but if one could endure it, then the tool nurtured would naturally be very powerful. On top of the city wall, everyone listened to Ling Han's explanation, and nodded repeatedly. Some people even secretly guessed Ling Han's identity. He clearly looked only 24 or 25 years old, so how did he know so many secrets? His background probably wasn't simple. Xianyuan Ziguang revealed a hint of curiosity and said, "Nurturing a tool with one's body, it's really the first time I've seen it. Let me experience it." Zhu Tiange grasped the sword in his hand, and his lazy expression was instantly swept clean, emitting a fanatical battle intent. He shouted loudly, "As you wish." He suddenly exerted force through his legs, and swiftly shot towards Xianyuan Ziguang. The black sword danced like blood, and 17 flashes of sword chi formed, but like whips, they twined towards Xianyuan Ziguang. "Interesting," Xianyuan Ziguang murmured. Xianyuan Ziguang murmured, one hand still behind his back, while the other hand flicked lightly, and a fire tiger appeared, biting towards the sword chi. "What a joke, you want to dissolve my black fiend sword like this?" Zhu Tiange sneered. "Is it not possible?" Xianyuan Ziguang said proudly. That fire tiger suddenly expanded, turning into a size of 30 meters, emitting a terrifying baleful aura, condensing chi into ray. Bai Yuan's gaze tightened. This youngster is really amazing, almost condensing into ray, but he's deliberately suppressing it, obviously wanting to cultivate more chi. Such great courage. Ray crushed chi in terms of quality. Back then, after Rain Emperor formed Fist Ray, he could battle a 9th layer Flower Blossom tier demonic ape with cultivation at the 1st layer of the Flower Blossom tier. It could be seen how powerful Ray's power was. This could cause a fundamental increase in a martial artist's battle prowess. But Xianyuan Ziguang was able to condense Ray and forcibly suppress it. Firstly, it could be seen how powerful his martial art talent was, and secondly, it could be seen that he was ambitious, not content with 22 flashes of chi. In some aspects, geniuses were all the same. They all existed to attack the limits. This fire tiger wasn't just one flash of chi, but was condensed from 22 flashes of chi. However, it was different from Ray, which was integrated as one, and was more like a combination. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. He could use other people's knowledge to improve himself, and Xianyuan Ziguang's train of thought was very good, simulating chi into Ray. In this way, he could continue cultivating chi and also increase chi's power. It was truly a remarkable pioneering feat. Chapter 566. Xianyuan Ziguang and Zhu Tiange started a fierce battle. Both of them held back. One only used a single hand, and the other didn't even use a corpse soldier. Obviously, if Xianyuan Ziguang, if he was forced to use his hands first, then he would be at a disadvantage. On the other hand, if he could force out Zhu Tiange's corpse soldier with a single hand, then he would have a certain advantage. Of course, this advantage wasn't great, because the 1,000 corpse sex battle prowess mainly relied on corpse soldiers. If Xianyuan Ziguang could only display 30% of his battle prowess with a single hand, then Zhu Tiange could at most display 20% of his battle prowess without using corpse soldiers. Sure enough, in less than a dozen rounds, Zhu Tiange was forced to summon the corpse soldier. 5. The limit of the Flower Blossom tier was to control 6 corpses, and he had reached 5. Even if it was just one more, when one was close to the limit, this bit of advantage could be infinitely magnified. 5 corpse soldiers were definitely stronger than 4, and not just by a little bit. Xianyuan Ziguang obviously didn't dare to be careless anymore. Both his hands moved simultaneously, starting a battle with Zhu Tiange and the 5 corpse soldiers. Victory and defeat couldn't be decided in a short while, which was enough to show how terrifying the two youngsters were. The older generation is no match for them. Youngsters these days are really scary. Sure enough, it's the time when martial art is flourishing. Talented youths are emerging one after another. Unless one is a genius of an era, one is not qualified to compete with these youths. On top of the city wall, quite a few people exclaimed in surprise, sighing at the strength of Xianyuan Ziguang and Zhu Tiange. However, young people as powerful as them should be rare, right? Yes, in the Central Plains, only Yao Huiyi, Meng Daiwu, and a few others can reach such heights. Definitely not more than 10. A very senior person made a very certain conclusion, and everyone nodded their heads in agreement. When Ling Han heard this, he couldn't help but smile and said, "Hu Niu, go down and show me some moves." "All right, let them witness Niu's power." Hu Niu leaped down from the city gates, her hands on her hips, and said, "Who wants to fight Niu?" After the members of the 1,000 Corpse sect looked at each other, they all laughed loudly. This was only a little girl of 6 or 7 years old, and they could kill her with a single finger. If they really made a move against this little girl, that would be too embarrassing. They all ignored her, and for a moment, they actually overlooked the fact that Hu Niu had jumped down from the top of the city walls, and had not walked out. Bai Yuan, however, revealed a surprised expression because he actually couldn't see through Hu Niu's cultivation level. If the other party was really just an ordinary little girl, then how could she have possibly jumped down from such a high city gate? These youngsters were careless, but he was not. He had eaten more salt than these youngsters had eaten rice. Being careful and prudent was the only secret that had allowed him to live until now and reach the heaven tier. Naturally, it was impossible for him to be careless in his old age. He thought for a moment and said, "Bianhao, go fight her." Venerable White. Bianhao felt wronged. Why did he have to go? She was just a little girl, and it was already very shameful for him to take a step forward. "Don't be careless," Bai Yuan warned. Bianhao finally revealed a surprised expression. Hearing Venerable White's tone, it seemed that this little girl was not simple. Just now, he said that prodigies like Xinyuan Ziguang and Zhu Tiange couldn't be found in the whole Middle State, but now, a random little girl that came out was strong to such a nature-defying degree. After the 4 Corpse soldiers were easily dealt with by Hu Niu, Bianhao could only helplessly admit defeat. He couldn't even win with Corpse soldiers, not to mention without Corpse soldiers' help. Hu Niu laughed loudly and said, "Who else? Niu wants to fight 1 against 10. The 1,000 Corpse sect's side couldn't help but fall into silence. Although Bianhao's strength could only rank 8th or 9th among their 10 disciples, Hu Niu was too relaxed just now, so to suppress this little girl, Zhu Tiange probably had to be dispatched. The problem was Zhu Tiange was still fighting fiercely with Xinyuan Ziguang, so he had to wait. Bai Yuan could only say, "Consider it your 9 consecutive wins. The 10th match, wait for Old Third to fight this one, then fight with you." "If you want Niu to wait? Then I won't play." Hu Niu stomped her feet in dissatisfaction and returned. On top of the city walls, everyone's eyes were filled with astonishment as they looked at Hu Niu. And some of the older generation even wanted to take this little girl as a disciple. This little girl was already so strong now, so when she grew up, how terrifying would she become? In the future, among the elites of the world, there would definitely be a place for her. Chapter 567. It wasn't easy to cultivate the thunderclap 9th heaven. Thinking back, Ling Han had been struck by lightning for a few days in order to cultivate the body of lightning to the small success stage. And to improve the body of lightning, one had to continue being struck by lightning, absorbing the essence from the lightning and gradually improving. This was extremely slow. From the time Ling Han cultivated to the small success stage until now, the steps he took were pitifully small. It couldn't be helped. Although the lightning strikes were extremely terrifying, for the body of lightning, the lightning essence contained within was extremely little. To be able to reach the large success stage within 50 years, Ling Han already considered it extremely fast. It was indeed fast. The large success stage of the body of lightning corresponded to the Shattering Void tier. And how many Shattering Void tier cultivators could cultivate it within 50 years? In the past, that was simply unrealistic. Even the deity transformation tier might not be able to achieve it. And only now, with the blossoming of the age of martial arts, speeding up the formation of elites, reaching the Shattering Void tier in 50 years was truly possible. But the benefits brought to Ling Han by a single flower of lightning surpassed the sum of the lightning strikes he'd received previously. How shocking was this? "Hu Niu, you're definitely my lucky general," Ling Han said spontaneously. Hu Niu was happy and said proudly, "Niu is Ling Han's lucky general." The two continued forward, but to Ling Han's disappointment, they didn't encounter another flower of lightning for a long time. They walked for close to the time it took for an incense stick to burn before finally arriving at the second flower of lightning. Hu Niu moved again, plucking the strange flower. Ling Han wasn't in a hurry to refine it, and instead stored it in the Black Tower. Now, he was more interested in the valley itself. What gave birth to this river of lightning? After walking for a while, Hong Long Long, the sound of tidal waves crashing could be heard. But it wasn't from the river of lightning. Ling Han was shocked. He turned his eyes to the other side, and shockingly saw that another river had appeared. But what surged in this river wasn't real water, nor was it lightning but flames. It was hard to imagine that the flames were surging like a river, and they even made loud noises as they slapped. If this was lava, then it would be easy to understand, but it wasn't. It was pure flames, and there were patterns flickering in the flames. What was shocking was that Ling Han also discovered the patterns of the lightning attribute within. Previously, there were also flame patterns in the river of lightning. Could it be? Ling Han had a guess in his mind. This river of lightning and river of fire had once intersected, which was why they affected each other. He continued forward, and after a while, as expected, the two rivers intersected. However, out of Ling Han's expectations, it wasn't that the two rivers intersected, but merged together. There was only one river left. Lightning and flames surged in the river at the same time, yet they were clearly separated. The well water didn't interfere with the river water, and one white and one red appeared so dazzling. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder the two rivers affected each other. It turned out that they came from the same source. Although they still separated later on, it was inevitable that they would still affect each other to some extent. He was even more curious about what was at the end of this river, and why could it produce such a marvelous scene. However, it became more and more difficult to follow the river. Because the lightning and flames intersected, the power produced was even more terrifying. The more it was so, the more his curiosity grew, and he wanted to know the reason. Small Tower, do you know what this place is? He used his divine sense to communicate with the Black Tower. There's a sliver of source power. Small Tower revealed a sliver of caution. If you find it for me to swallow, I can repair 100 millionth of it. Fuck. Ling Han really wanted to curse. This place was so terrifying. And the river of lightning and fire surged, exuding the brilliance of the shattering void tear. Just thinking about it, he knew that the source was extraordinary. However, he could only repair 1/1000th of the Black Tower. Then, if he had the chance to live, would he be able to see the Black Tower light up again? Be careful, Small Tower warned. If there is life here, then it would be too easy to kill you. Nonsense. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to pay attention to it, and simply continued to advance. This was a stretch of pure darkness. He couldn't see, hear, or smell anything, and even his sense of touch was disappearing. He was clearly holding Hunyo's small hand, yet he found that this sense of touch was becoming weaker and weaker, as if he had become a walking corpse. He couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. What kind of lousy place was this? It was too strange. He didn't know how much time had passed, but Ling Han finally couldn't sense anything. He didn't even know if he was still walking in this cave. Having lost his 5 senses, what difference was there between him and a walking corpse? He told himself that he was searching, but he completely didn't know where he was going. Had he bumped into a wall? Because he had no sense of touch, even if he kept banging into the mountain wall, he wouldn't be able to sense anything. Forced to do so, he entered the Black Tower. Even if she wanted to cry, it should be for the 1,000 corpse sect below, and more so for the defensive formation in the sky, okay? Ling Han looked down and said to Bai Yuan, now we have 190 spots, right? Bai Yuan nodded, but his expression was a bit difficult. He didn't expect this at all. He originally wanted to temper these 10 youngsters to prevent them from being too proud and arrogant, but now this blow seemed to be a bit too big. Xianyuan Ziguang was fine, at least being matched by Zhu Tiangu, but the appearance of Hunyo and Helian Sun Shui was practically trampling on their confidence. One was a little girl only 6 or 7 years old, and the other had a freakish physical strength. In a battle of the same age, they were practically invincible. Now the 1,000 Corpse sect urgently needed to win to boost their morale, and also boost the confidence of these 9 youngsters. Ling Han leaped down from the top of the city wall, and said, "Then I'll be your opponent and earn a few more spots to leave the city." Where did this youngster get his confidence from? Bai Yuan sneered. Xin Yuan Ziguang was in the 9th layer of the flower blossom tier, rarely seen at this age, and he even formed 22 flashes of qi, possessing terrifying strength. He couldn't see through Hu Niu and Helian Sun Shui, so someone he couldn't see through obviously wasn't simple. But Ling Han? The 2nd layer of the flower blossom tier was clear at a glance. Even if this brat could surpass 10 stars to battle, he would only have 12 stars of battle prowess, and almost half of the people here could crush him. Good, this brat could boost their morale. Bai Yuan nodded and said, "Fourth you go." The 4th Tian Xiaoning, ranked 2nd in strength among the 10. He himself was an expert in the 8th layer of the flower blossom tier, and the number of corpse soldiers he could control was similarly as many as 5, not much inferior to Zhu Tiangu. Letting Tian Xiaoning go straight up was to obtain an overwhelming victory to boost morale. Tian Xiaoning walked out with large strides. He was close to 30 years old, tall but naturally bald. His forehead was glossy and he didn't even have eyebrows. His entire face gave people an extremely strange feeling. When Ling Han saw, he couldn't help but laugh and said, cultivating to the point of balding, "You're indeed extraordinary." The corner of Tian Xiaoning's mouth couldn't help but twitch, and he said, "You're shooting your mouth off like this, ridiculing randomly. This is inviting a great disaster for your own life." "Oh, you want my life?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Just based on what you said just now, you should die," Tian Xiaoning said coldly. "You really don't have a sense of humor. Did you spoil your brain from cultivating?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Impudent." Tian Xiaoning struck out with a palm towards Ling Han, and the black corpse qi turned into a skull, biting towards Ling Han. Ling Han casually flicked a finger, and this skull instantly exploded. He smiled faintly and said, "Better summon the corpse soldiers. Your bit of strength really isn't enough." Pooh! Quite a few people already spurted out blood. Although they only exchanged one move, and neither side used their full strength, Tian Xiaoning was at the 8th layer of the flower blossom tier. To be able to easily dissolve his attack, Ling Han's strength couldn't be underestimated. Tian Xiaoning looked coldly at Ling Han, and after a while he said, "Since you insist on being abused, then I'll fulfill your wish." He gave a long howl and instantly, a rumbling sound rang out. 5 coffins slid over and 5 corpse soldiers jumped out. "There's actually 5 corpse soldiers," an old antique exclaimed. "The difference of 1 corpse, but the difference in strength is like heaven and earth. This time that youngster is in danger." Chapter 569. Ling Han crooked his finger and said, "Come. I'll grant your wish." Tian Xiaoning gave a long howl, controlling the 5 corpse soldiers to attack Ling Han. And when the 5 corpse soldiers pounced at Ling Han, covering his figure, everyone shook their heads. This young man was obviously dead for sure. This wasn't the first person to die today, and it wouldn't be the last, so everyone didn't take it to heart. Who would care about an unknown person? However, the next scene made everyone's jaws drop. Ling Han's figure was extremely slippery, moving freely under the siege of 5 corpse soldiers. If he couldn't dodge, he would block with his hand, and with a flash of golden light, the attacking corpse soldier was shaken back. How is this possible? Isn't this guy only at the 2nd layer of the flower blossom tier? How can his strength be so terrifying? Those corpse soldiers have about 14 stars battle prowess, right? Definitely 14 stars, but this guy can block them with a casual wave of his hand. This strength is too terrifying. Genius, an absolute genius. He's definitely not inferior to Xinyuan Ziguang and Yao Huiyu. The face of the veteran from before twitched. In a short while, 3 super geniuses ran out and ruthlessly slapped him in the face, wishing there was a big hole in the ground for him to crawl into. He has some strength. Tian Xiaoning sneered and joined the battle. The weapon he used was a bone sword. Its shape was probably taken from the leg bone of a giant beast and then polished. There were vein-like patterns on it, definitely naturally formed. Once activated, the vein-like patterns shone and linked up one after another, releasing a shocking grand light. Ling Han seemed to see a giant ferocious beast floating on the sword's blade. That terrifying body seemed to be able to crush heaven and earth. His eyes lit up and he said, "This was refined from the leg bone of a Wuxia, right?" According to legend, the true dragon had 9 sons, but each one was different. Because they were all born from the true dragon and different demonic beasts, the offspring only inherited part of the true dragon's bloodline. The Wuxia was one of them. It looked like a fish but not a fish. Its head was like a lion, but it had a pair of horns. Its entire body was covered in dragon scales. Even if they only had a trace of the true dragon's bloodline, all of the beasts in the world regarded the true dragon as their leader. From this it could be seen just how high their status was. Possessing a trace of the true dragon's bloodline was already extremely extraordinary and difficult to find in the world. Tian Xiaoning revealed a look of surprise and said, "You actually recognize this sword?" He also only knew about the legend of the Wuxia after being bestowed the sword. It was just that this Wuxia's bloodline was even thinner. Otherwise it was a dragon's descendant. How could it be so easily killed and its leg bones extracted to make a sword? Your bloodline is thin, and your vein-like patterns are heterogeneous. That's all there is to it. Ling Han made another evaluation. Tian Xiaoningbo was so angry that his nose became crooked. "You were shocked at first, but now you're saying that's all. How can I accept this?" He snorted coldly and said, "It's more than enough to kill you." He brandished the sword and slashed at Ling Han. This bone sword was extracted from the leg bone of a divine beast descendant, and then refined with various precious materials. It could be regarded as one of the best among level 6 spirit tools. With this slash, an enormous phantom of a vicious beast immediately appeared, pouncing towards Ling Han. Ling Han laughed and said, "This sword is not bad, I'll take it." The demon birth sword could not be used casually, so temporarily using this sword as a replacement was not bad. Impudent! Tian Xiaoning was furious. This brat was too arrogant, actually treating him as nothing. Ling Han used the demon fairy step and directly arrived in front of Tian Xiaoning, his fists punching out continuously. The 5 corpse soldiers actually became decorations. Amidst angry roars and strange cries, they charged back and chased after Ling Han. This time, it became a head-on confrontation between Tian Xiaoning and Ling Han. He was not afraid, however. With a swing of his sword, 9 flashes of sword chi were formed. With the support of the bone sword, each flash of sword chi transformed into a terrifying 3-meter-long waterfall, slashing towards Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally even more unafraid, and directly swung his fists to meet it. Pung 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 pung, these sword chi were instantly shattered. Seeing this scene, everyone held their heads and cried out in surprise. This was too inconceivable. One had to know that those 9 flashes of sword chi were all stimulated by the bone sword, and their sharpness was equivalent to that of a bone sword. This was also the reason why everyone pursued a good spirit tool. However, Ling Han shattered these sword chi with one punch, and his fist actually didn't suffer the slightest injury. Was that still a body of flesh and blood? Tian Xiaoning was also shocked. He originally thought that blood would splatter in the sky if Ling Han swung his fist to block it, but unexpectedly nothing happened at all. He couldn't help but doubt the bone sword in his hand. Was it really made from the bone of an ancient divine beast? "No need to doubt, this is because my fist is harder," Ling Han said with a smile. He cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and if he really cultivated the body of diamond, his physique would definitely be even more tyrannical than a true dragon's. Although he now had the body of iron sheet, the bone sword was only made from a gloomy viper, not even the son of a divine beast, so how could it possibly injure him? To threaten his 6th-tier body of iron sheet, it had to use a 7th-tier spirit tool no matter what. As they spoke, Ling Han's fists continuously bombarded, forcing Tian Xiaoning to retreat. This was very interesting. Tian Xiaoning retreated, Ling Han chased, and behind him were 5 corpse soldiers, forcibly turning what should have been a group brawl into a one-on-one chase. Haha! This young man discovered the corpse soldiers' biggest weakness. Someone on the city wall clapped and laughed. That's right, the weakness of corpse soldiers is that their speed isn't fast enough. After all, they're just remains and can't use movement arts. But just the explosive power itself is equivalent to the 9th layer of the flower blossom tier. and there aren't many that can surpass them in speed. This young man's movement arts are truly extraordinary. Many things could actually be seen through with a little poke, but even if it was seen through, not everyone could do it. This was what it meant to be easy for a person to carry a burden, but if one had to go up himself, he might only be able to groan. Tian Xiaoning was shocked. In this way, the 5 corpse soldiers were useless, and he became the one facing Ling Han alone. However, the majority of the 1,000 corpse sex battle prowess came from corpse soldiers, and if corpse soldiers couldn't play a role, their own strength would naturally be greatly discounted. He was actually quite extraordinary, with the cultivation of the 8th layer of the flower blossom tier and battle prowess reaching 15 stars, enough to look down on his peers, but encountering a freak like Ling Han, he could only be miserable. Ancient bone patterns condensed on Ling Han's fists. Close combat was now his forte, and the power of body cultivators burst forth, not much weaker than origin power. Each punch was like a pile driver. Only body cultivators could bombard so fast. The physical strength of origin power cultivators couldn't keep up, so they could only work on chi, replacing speed with quantity. Pung 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 pung. After more than 100 punches in a row, Tian Xiaoning's bone sword instantly flew out of his hand and was caught by Ling Han. Give it back. Tian Xiaoning hurriedly called out. This was a treasure personally bestowed to him by the Lord Sect Master. Ling Han shook his head and said, "In your hands, this spirit tool has really fallen into disgrace." He turned around and stared at the 5 corpse soldiers that pounced at him. Chapter 570. Ling Han charged towards the 5 corpse soldiers, brandishing his bone sword as the desolate hell sword technique was already in full swing, but it was purely for defense. A circle of white light danced, and his defense was impenetrable, keeping the 5 corpse soldiers outside of the sword light. He had just seen Xinyuan Ziguang condense 22 flashes of qi. It wasn't a ray, but it had some of a ray's power, greatly enlightening him. Why couldn't he? Even if it was just a simulated ray, he might be able to push the second sword of the 3 styles of black origin, and the destructive power of that attack would become incredibly terrifying. Although the mysterious 3000 could unleash 3000 flashes of sword light at its limit, with terrifying destructive power, it was essentially a group attack move, and 10,000 techniques returned to one was truly unstoppable. Gathering 3000 strikes into one sword, what kind of terrifying destructive power was this? Ling Han treated the 5 corpse soldiers as sparring partners. As he brandished his bone sword, sword qi danced freely, but it was disorderly. He was in the midst of comprehension and had no clue yet, so he was naturally like a child brandishing a sword, completely out of order. But it didn't matter, the desolate hell sword technique was a heaven-grade technique known for its defense in the first place, and with this operation it naturally made his defense watertight. Unless he crushed Ling Han in battle prowess, it would be difficult to break through this purely defensive sword technique. Tian Xiaoning shouted in anger, emitting corpse qi from all over his body to stimulate the 5 corpse soldiers, causing their battle prowess to soar, wanting to take down Ling Han in one fell swoop. Ling Han was immersed in his own world, and the bone sword operated almost instinctively. Occasionally there would be an oversight that the corpse soldiers caught and slapped, but so what? He had a body of iron sheet, which was as hard as rare metals of the same level. The more the corpse soldiers exerted force, the more their own skeletons trembled, as if they were about to collapse. This wasn't an illusion. It was like a stone man fighting with a wooden man. Even if the stone man sat still and let the wooden man bombard him, the harder the wooden man bombarded, the easier it would be for him to collapse. However, the gap between Ling Han and the corpse soldiers was not as big as that between a rock and a piece of wood. Moreover, the power that was blasted was real. Ling Han's physique was indeed strong, but the impact of the power still made him feel a little uncomfortable. Thankfully, he would only occasionally be hit once or twice. With the circulation of the indestructible heavens scroll, the boiling energy in his body immediately calmed down, and he was completely fine. Watching such a battle, everyone was speechless. You're the corpse soldier, right? How can you be so hard? And some people even thought that Ling Han's previous battle was incomparably nimble, shaking off the 5 cumbersome corpse soldiers and forcing Tian Xiaoning to only be able to fight one-on-one, but now he displayed terrifying defensive strength. This fellow was too well-rounded. His attacks were like the horns of an antelope, leaving no trace to be seen. His defense was as steady as a mountain. His heavy sword had no edge, and there was almost no flaw to be found. In a battle of the same level, who could be his match? Xinyuan Ziguang or Yao Huiyu? Ling Han didn't care about everyone's shock. He only used the 5 corpse soldiers as whetstones, sharpening his condensation of sword qi. Moreover, not far away, Xinyuan Ziguang was fighting fiercely with Zhu Tiangu, so he could refer to it at any time and apply what he learned on the spot. This was equivalent to teaching on the spot, and Ling Han also had the eye of truth. He constantly observed the way Xinyuan Ziguang combined the 22 flashes of qi, turning it into his own comprehension. How could Tian Xiaoning possibly know that Ling Han was trying to break through? He thought he was finally suppressed by the corpse soldiers, and couldn't help but howl again and again, intensifying his attacks, vowing to kill Ling Han on the spot. However, though he had the upper hand on the battlefield, he was completely unable to turn this advantage into a victory. Ling Han seemed to only have the ability to parry, yet his defense was very steady. Occasionally, he would even counterattack, which was impossible to guard against. Ling Han's eyes became brighter and brighter. He suddenly laughed loudly and said, "I understand. I understand." "What do you understand?" Tian Xiaoning looked at Ling Han and felt that this opponent's brain was a bit abnormal. He only called out, "It's good that you understand. Return my sword." "All right, I'll return it to you." Ling Han swung his sword, firing out a flash of sword qi. However, this flash of sword qi was extremely thick, and it was twisting like a snake, looking extremely unstable. Tian Xiaoning was greatly shocked. The feeling this flash of sword qi gave him was too terrifying, giving him a chill that he definitely couldn't take it head-on. Pa! However, this flash of sword qi exploded on its own just as it was fired out. The shattered sword qi surged, raising a sky full of dust. Ha ha ha! A few disciples of the 1,000 Corpse sect instantly laughed loudly, but even more people revealed expressions of deep thought. This sword qi was unusual. He's condensing sword qi. Someone finally came out and cried out in shock. Right, he's condensing ray. Impossible, how can ray scatter? Moreover, this is clearly sword qi, without the slightest hint of ray's charm. I understand this guy is learning from Xinyuan Ziguang, combining sword qi, and not fusing them into ray. This time everyone was speechless. This young man was too freakish, wasn't he? He obviously thought of imitating Xinyuan Ziguang's battle because he saw it. But the problem was, could this kind of secret art be learned in a short while? Just like how everyone had seen sword qi and saber qi, how many people could cultivate them? Comprehending them on their own and comprehending them on their own were two completely different things. Failed. Ling Han shook his head, but there was no sign of disappointment on his face. This was an attempt in the first place. Again. He slashed out again and hung. The thick sword qi was like a pillar of light. However, it was still the same. Not long after the sword qi was fired out, it collapsed on its own before displaying its might. Failed again. It's obvious. Is it that easy to grasp a secret art in such a short time? There must be a trick to using it. How can it be learned with a few glances? Even on the city wall, there were quite a few people who made sarcastic remarks. Ling Han was too freakish, making many people jealous. However, some attentive people discovered that this sword qi of Ling Han's lasted a tiny bit longer than before. It was really just a tiny bit, but it was certainly prolonged. Regarding this point, Ling Han was naturally the clearest. He revealed a smile and swung out again without being discouraged, improving on his shortcomings. 10 strikes, 20 strikes, 30 strikes. His improvement became more and more obvious, so obvious that most people discovered that the time his sword qi took to condense was getting longer and longer. Tian Xiaoning was shocked. Was he becoming Ling Han's whetstone? He roared loudly and said, "Blood bone break." Instantly, the 5 corpse soldiers roared violently, letting out beast-like roars. Their right arms actually underwent a strange transformation, turning into a bone spear. emitting a terrifying aura. The 5 corpse soldiers brandished their bone spears at the same time, thrusting towards Ling Han. That aura seemed to be able to penetrate even the strongest defense with one strike. Break! Ling Han also shouted lightly, swinging out a resplendent sword. Chapter 571. This cloak has the effect of concealment, right? Ling Han said. Corpse 2 nodded and said, that's right, this is a secret treasure. Within a certain distance it can conceal divine sense and isolate vision. It's a divine item for assassination and infiltration. Thanks for dispelling my doubts, Ling Han said with a smile. You're welcome. You're a man about to die anyway, and I usually give a certain amount of respect to those who die in my hands, Corpse 2 said with a smile. Since there's a Corpse 2, is there a Corpse 1? Ling Han asked again. Corpse 2 shook his head and said, there's no Corpse 1, but there's one called Corpse Boss, who awakened a step earlier than me and developed intelligence. Ling Han's heart instantly beat wildly. Awakened a step earlier and developed intelligence, what did this mean? Could it be that this Corpse 2 wasn't born but like the rock spirit, its body existed for countless years, and then suddenly developed intelligence, giving birth to a special life? Corpse 2 cracked a smile, but it was so funny that it was very stiff, making people feel strange just by looking at it. He said, you guessed right, I was originally a corpse. I don't know which elite I was in the last life, but my corpse didn't decompose after tens of thousands of years, and finally obtained the spirit of heaven and earth, developing intelligence anew. Ling Han couldn't help but look solemn. No wonder he felt this person was very old and very young, extremely contradictory. It turned out that a new soul was born on the old corpse, a miraculous life bestowed by the heavens. It was a combination of life and death, so it was obviously young and old. In that case, Corpse Boss is also like this. Corpse 2 nodded and said, that's right, Corpse Boss is stronger than me because his corpse is better. However, after developing a second life, I can cultivate anew, and in the future, I won't lose to him. Damn freak. This was an old corpse coming back to life, and it was unknown how shocking his battle prowess would be. Could he use the secret technique from the last life? One had to know that the owner of this body could actually keep the corpse from decaying for tens of thousands of years, so he was definitely an extremely powerful existence when he was alive. His martial intent was definitely fused into every piece of flesh and bone. Now that the body wasn't decaying, his martial intent might even be reactivated, so how could this not be shocking? The Thousand Corpse sect really thinks highly of me, sending such a big shot to kill me, Ling Han said. The other party's strength was at least 5 stars of heaven tier, and he believed that such strength could be called an expert among experts in the Thousand Corpse sect. There were definitely not many that were stronger than him. Corpse 2 laughed loudly and said, who asked you to seek your own death and establish a dynasty? This is something our sect definitely can't allow. Ling Han's heart moved and he said, could it be that the Thousand Corpse sect also has plans to establish a nation? Haha, our sect's goal is to establish a massive corpse nation. This isn't any secret, Corpse 2 said indifferently. Ling Han seemed to have caught on to something and said, could it be that the Thousand Corpse sect is also? He made a sky-splitting gesture. Interested, Corpse 2 grinned and said, that's right, but it's slightly different from what you think. Splitting open the sky was to bring the entire vast lands into the realm of gods, raising the level of the vast lands as a whole, turning it into divine land. Wait, Ling Han was startled inwardly. Since there were people who cultivated netherworld arts and could break open another layer of void to enter the netherworld, then which realm would the people who cultivated netherworld arts ascend to when they split open the sky? Netherworld. The Thousand Corpse sect was also a very big dream. However, with the strength that the Thousand Corpse sect displayed so far, did they have such strength? It wasn't that Ling Han looked down on them, but the difference was really quite far. Probably, any one of the 5 great sects could sweep them clean. Otherwise, why would the Thousand Corpse sect be a coward for so many years? Corpse 2 was neither hurried nor slow, as if he wasn't here to be an assassin at all. He said unhurriedly, I know you're stalling for time, but so am I. You've been poisoned by my corpse poison, and it's impossible to expel it. It'll only become more and more serious, as I said. I'm quite respectful to the dead. Ling Han lowered his head and saw that the black wound on his waist was expanding as expected, almost turning his entire waist black. Zhu Xian'er immediately cried out in shock. Being wounded by someone from the Thousand Corpse sect, there couldn't possibly be a good ending. If he didn't die, he'd become a corpse soldier. Ling Han nodded and said, as expected of a 10,000-year-old corpse demon, my body of diamond actually can't automatically expel such corpse poison. He circulated the indestructible heaven scroll, and Wang golden light immediately flickered all over his body, making him seem like an awe-inspiring god of war. Corpse 2 put his hands behind his back, appearing indifferent and having no intention of stopping him at all. He said indifferently, "You're right, I'm indeed a 10,000-year-old corpse. At least this body is, and not just 10,000 years but at least several 100,000 years. He suddenly seemed to have the interest to talk and said, corpses are like trees having corpse wheels. The corpse wheels on my body have at least 300,000. Sorry, I don't have the leisure to count them clearly. Counting age, this was probably the oldest generation in the vast lands. Even Ma Duobao, who'd slept for 100 or 200,000 years, couldn't compare. For 300,000 years, my body has always been placed in a place of extinguishing yang and extreme yin, forming a heavy corpse qi that's beyond imagination. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to give birth to a new divine sense, and could only become a corpse soldier. Ling Han's whole body was shrouded in golden light, and he said, then why do you need to rely on the Thousand Corpse sect? You can be free and unrestrained, and run amok between heaven and earth. People always have some dreams. My dream is the same as the Thousand Corpse sects, so we're obviously like-minded. Besides, Corpse 2 broke into a smile. This is a corpse of mine, and also needs corpse qi to increase cultivation. If I don't join the Thousand Corpse sect, where can I go? The golden light faded, and Ling Han shook his head and said, a 10,000-year-old corpse is powerful as expected. I can't expel such corpse poison. It wasn't that the indestructible heaven scroll wasn't powerful, but that this old corpse had been buried for over 300,000 years, and the corpse poison had expired for too long. Even a shattering void tier elite probably wouldn't be able to withstand it. Moreover, Ling Han's cultivation was a bit low, and if he were at the same level as Corpse 2, then the indestructible heaven scroll would definitely have room to show off. At this time, the corpse poison had already climbed to Ling Han's chest. Corpse 2 was slightly surprised and said, your strength isn't bad, and the cultivation technique you cultivate is even better, being able to control the spread of the corpse poison so slowly. If it were another deity transformation tier elite, even 1,000 of them would have become corpse soldiers. I really can't bear to kill such a genius. Although corpse soldiers are powerful, they don't have intelligence after all, so there's a limit to how powerful they are. He appeared to be very rueful. Since you said so, how could I disappoint you? Ling Han smiled, and his figure flashed again and again, even faster than the blink of an eye. However, the corpse poison on his body completely dissipated. His skin was bright and clean like warm jade, emitting divine light and untainted by dust. Corpse 2's expression changed in shock. How was this possible? Phone reading was more refreshing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.